right, guys, it is now 5 o'clock on Thursday, May 19th, 2022. I'd like to call the meeting to order for the Curriculum Committee of the MTSC. And with that, our first item on our agenda is the out-of-state travel, which is both information and an actionable item. And it is for the football competition in Huntington, Michigan, which I believe at this point we probably hand over to Mr. Steve Tapp.
Thank you. The first annual Battle of the Shores would like to be taking place in August. Our football coach, Greg Enns, and the football coach from Mona Shores High School have met at a football clinic, and they're talking about the opportunity to bring both teams together and go across the lake and play a game. Second game of the year for Lincoln High School, and so our football coaches have and the Booster Club have put together the cost of things, and my steps that I had to do was get things approved by the WIA because it's an out-of-state travel situation. So that's been approved already, and now it comes to the Curriculum Committee in regards to any questions that you might have. And the information that I shared with you and that Coach Jens put together really talks about bringing two teams together and our kids coming together, kind of making it a team bonding situation at the beginning of the year. And this year we would be going to Mona Shores, and then the following year Mona Shores would come to our place. And similar to what we did last year with the soccer team, Ludington came over and played our kids, and then the next one that you'll see is the soccer team going over there to play. The costs obviously are a little bit greater for the football team because we've got 45, 50 kids and the staff and equipment. But through the fundraising efforts and the activity account that the football program has and the Booster Club that they have outside of the district, the opportunity that would be covered by them, the major costs of the car ferry and this and that, are covered by the Booster Club. The costs of the student supervision would be covered by the athletic department in the amount of $4,000 because of the 50 kids and the football coaches that would be overseeing them off of school time type of thing. And no school time is going to be lost because we don't have school during that time. You have questions on things in regards to it?
How does this account for in the budget? Is that something that we plan for? Or?
Yeah, because we've planned in the past. The budget we've covered this in the past in regards to the cost of the student supervision is covered in the budget. There are numerous accounts, and this would be the supervision account underneath athletics. I'm trying to think of exactly the line number item, but there are certain funds that when my budget comes to me, I put aside a certain amount of money for things like this.
Okay.
Okay. And so this is accounted for. We don't have a lot of these types of opportunities. This is one, and because of the costs of the number of kids, that's why we're looking at the greatest amount of the $4,000.
So for next year, you said we'll be having Mona Shores here, and we'll absorb some of those costs then because we'll be the hosts.
Yeah, and yeah.
So it's kind of every other year. So
every other year.
Does that go on the budget too?
So next year, the cost would be getting. Our cost won't be as great because the car ferry is right next to the school. That's where the kids are going to be staying. And our parents have already talked about the fact that we're not going to get a bus. We're going to take our cars and pick the kids up and go from it to a little bit smaller school. They're not going to have 50 kids. They're going to have 35 kids. And the travel is not going to be as great. The cost of meals and things along those lines are going to be covered by our Booster Club during that time.
the cost of it per student going over is really very cheap.
Well, it's still a cost.
Yeah.
It's still a cost, and the concern that I had when Greg proposed this to me was, I don't want our kids to have to pay for something because we end up having the kids that can afford it and the kids that can't afford it. And the opportunity that they would have, that some kids that will never go across on a ferry, but turn it into this type of experience and then a return game the next year. I don't know exactly the cost. I haven't worked out the cost for next year. I could come up with an estimate, but they've already said we're not probably going to get buses for them. Mona Shores, the bus company, the school district owns the bus company, or they have the buses, so I don't think it's a major cost for the district that way.
And the kids will stay at
Stay right at so our kids will stay right at Mona Shores High School, and for the 2 days or 3 days that they're there, and that's, and I think it's going to be one big camp, so I like that, and we're turning it into kind of like a college bowl game, and so there's going to be activities over at Mona Shores for our kids and their kids that come together, and it's going to be more than a game, or more than a competition on that night. It's going to be something that the community is going to get behind. And likewise, we hope to do the same thing. Both mayors are having some challenges, and we're gonna send over some Manitowoc product, and then they'll share some of those types of things. So the hope is that it's going to create a kind of a lasting memory for our kids, but it's also going to be an opportunity for. It's not going to be about the game, it's going to be about the relationships that they're going to form.
And the experience, yeah.
And the experience, absolutely, absolutely.
Dave, just for clarification, when you say next year, that would really be the 23-24 fiscal budget.
Correct, yeah.
So this would come out of the 22-23 budget, and then next year would be a different fiscal.
Correct, yep.
Any more questions?
I just have a comment. It's a great opportunity for our children to grow and learn and foster relationships, so I'm very behind it. The only question I have is there any other schools around the area or that has tried to seek us out to have competitions with us for non-conference games besides obviously Ludington that you are looking to? Or
Yeah, our first game of the year is against Appleton West, and all of the schools around, we stay within our conference for the most part, with, just probably 5 years ago, we didn't have a non-conference schedule. Since the WI has changed realignment and realigned our schools for football, we have 2 non-conference games. Last year, or the first 2 years of the realignment, we had De Pere and Appleton West. So, and we had scheduled Appleton West or De Pere in the past. So instead of having De Pere, at De Pere, we are now going to Mona Shores this year, and the following year would be the expectation.
my follow-up question is, what is the enrollment at that school?
600?
So they're 600 for the whole school?
Yeah.
So they're
Little small, I think they're a Division III school or level 3 school. Yep. A good program, a solid program, but it's again, we're looking at it as, I think it's going to be a good close game, that type of situation, but it's going to be more of a relationship building more than the competition.
Okay.
Thanks. Yeah, good question. Thanks.
Okay, if there are no other questions, I'll look for a motion.
I'll make a motion. So,
Okay, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye, and the motion passes. Send them to, over the waters. Okay, next on our agenda, sorry, I bring the agenda. I believe it is the left here for soccer.
Good soccer, okay. Similar situation, in that our boys soccer program is doing a similar trip Ludington. Last year, Ludington came to Manitowoc and competed against the ship soccer team. They won 1-0. They came home, they brought the trophy home. And so this traveling trophy is coming. Hopefully we can go across the lake and beat them in the second annual game, if that's possible. A little bit smaller budget in regards to the travel situation, but a similar situation as we had in football. The cost is the cost of the student supervision, $1,472 by the district, and for the 23 kids and the 2 days, 8 hours each for that supervision time. And again, no loss of class time because it's not during the school year. But there are a lot of similarities between the football and the soccer. This would be the second annual one for soccer. Questions in regards to it, same type of thing, Tony and
I would just like to highlight and say thank you very much to our booster clubs. That's amazing, the amount of money that they're raising. Please extend that out to the heads of that, because I mean, that's quite a feat to raise. I mean, they're raising more money than we're even providing, so
Yeah.
And especially for the soccer being a smaller program. So.
Yeah. And I'll get into a little bit about the fundraising aspects. A couple of things is, through the concession stands throughout our seasons, for instance, the soccer program garners the profits from concession sales during their season. They also have some other fundraising aspects, and that fundraising, those fundraising dollars is in their activity account, overseen by the athletic department, and they get a monthly transaction statement that they are able to oversee. That money that money carries over from year to year, but they may have an apparel sales, a sweatshirt sale type of thing. They may do car washes. They may, festival foods in town does a festival food starts. Those types of things that our programs do that the teams and the clubs will fundraise for things that they want, may not, but the district monies cover the things that they need. I would buy, from my athletic department budget, would buy soccer balls, would buy, apparel for uniforms, would buy scorebooks, those types of things. But there are some other things that, for instance, soccer would like to have, and so they fundraise on their own to do that. And so that money then is put into their activity account, and here is their time, it's an every other year thing, so they've got 2 years to raise the next amount of money from the booster club standpoint as well as from their activity account, just so you have maybe a different or more of a perspective of, there's one, we don't allow kids to bang on doors to ask. They'll ask moms and dads to bang on the doors rather than the kids bang on the doors. That's one thing that we don't want kids to do, is start going around neighborhood and pounding the doors. You want to buy a car, you want to buy a t-shirt. So that does, and you're right, Matt, it's, the parents of our kids are there to support their kids by attending games and to raise money for these types of programs.
Any other questions? If not, I'll be looking for a motion. First.
Second.
Second, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Thank you, and good luck to both of our teams
Thank
going
you.
across Michigan. All right, thank you, Mr. Stepak. Next is, sorry, for some odd reason, I have a strange layout going on my computer today, so I believe it is for professional development in U.S. history. Is that right? And
Yes,
Nicole, that's you again.
Yep, that's me again.
Okay.
For the Nicole Seminar is one of our history teachers. She is seeking out-of-state travel July 11th to the 15th. in Indianapolis to attend the AP U.S. History Professional Development event. And the information that the big reason is for our AP kids in U.S. history, there's an exam that our kids are required to score well on or to take. And so she is seeking to leave the state to go to Indianapolis to be trained in the assessment practices so she can better prepare our kids to do the best on this this AP U.S. history exam.
Do you have any idea how many kids are taking AP history now? Just out of curiosity.
I don't know. No, sorry.
Oh, it's all right. It's kind of
I'll find it out. I'll send it to you tomorrow.
Okay.
Okay.
It's just a curiosity. You don't really need to do that.
Okay.
I was just wondering. Okay. Do we have any questions about the U.S. history professional development event?
Well, thank you once again to that person that's doing that. I mean, that's near and dear to me as well. The AP courses are very, very important. And I got to participate in that, got to go to Madison with league tennis back when I was in high school. So it's a very good program to have kids be more engaged and be ready for the AP exam for them to help themselves in future classes or to save money as well.
It's also nice that it happens during the summer too.
It is, and she's doing it during the summer when, not during the school year, but she's doing it on her own during the summer, and I appreciate that. I mean, our staff works extremely hard, and that time of July is a great time to kind of just get away from things too, and I appreciate it. I told her that when I got to my desk. Appreciate what she's done, what she's going to be doing.
The only piece that I questioned was in expenses was the $150 for gas for travel, because is that all she's seeking? Because it's 700 miles. So that would put it up around $400 if she gets the,
Right.
the per mile. I think it's
Yeah, and I
55.5% or 55 cents, per mile.
Yeah.
Probably an underestimate.
Yeah, I think this is an underestimate. I think she'd be more like $400.
Right.
Okay. Great. So that's something we take into consideration. I mean, still need to clarify that, so
Right.
that we're aware. Still probably worth it as far as I'm concerned. Math's 9.
Yeah, I guess the only question I would have is, and it sounds like these are items that we account for in the budget already, so we're not like seeking money that wasn't already budgeted. Yeah, if that's the case.
Yeah, right. I mean, it's a great point, Tony. Right.
Yeah, it's more of a matter of approval because it's out of state. So I think it has to do with, correct me if I'm wrong, with partners insurance and stuff too, what we have. People cross the borders, yeah. And policy.
I think it's just policy. Our policy says we're doing something out of state. You gotta get approved by the board.
Yeah. So if I may seek a motion, please, go to the board. Full board.
Yes, I make a motion to present to the board.
Okay, thank you.
Second.
All right, thank you. All right, all in favor, say aye.
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 Thank you.
I say opposed, but I think that's the
Thank you.
point of pretty best. Yeah, thank you so much, Steve.
Thank you.
I'm switching to my other device, it just makes some having issues with my phone. The next one would be Kids at Hope Masters, and I believe that's on a seminar. Who is seeking approval for that? It takes place in September.
So I also have Stacy Ledkin here from the county. This is kind of a partnership opportunity that was presented. It's being paid for out of a grant. It's an opportunity to learn more about Kids at Hope organization philosophy, which is utilized at the county, some other organizations in the community, other school districts, to learn more about it and how we could possibly utilize that as we look at what direction we're going to take our school district as we look at behavioral assistance support.
Yeah, and given that there are already schools that are using it, specifically Madison, who has had some success in it too. It's going to be actually an ad hoc committee a while ago. We've already discussed having more of a community, having that kind of connection with each other and knowing how things are going to work together. So Stacy, is there anything you wanted to add to it, and how have you been to it before?
I have. I've had the opportunity to go several times, and myself and 18 other people in our community have had that opportunity. This year we have Youth Justice Innovation Grant funding through the Department of Children and Families, which is our final year of funding. So this could be the last opportunity that I would have grant funds to support individuals going. I believe with cost sharing with some other entities, we are hoping to send somewhere between 12 and 14 people, which would be obviously the largest group we've sent. We'll have representation from youth and child care at the YMCA with court-appointed special advocates, the CASA program, as well as the Two Rivers School District, Manitowoc School District, hopefully. CISA 7 is looking at the possibility of partnering with us to send one individual. We also have Lisa Christopher, who's the former superintendent from Two Rivers, who's been acting as a hope coach in our community. And I'm talking with a judge tomorrow about the possibility of being present, and that judge has expressed interest in the past. It's a matter of timing for the scheduling. And probably one other person from the Human Services Department. I'm probably forgetting a person or two, but a good Northeast Wisconsin Area Health Education Center spring coordinator will be joining us as well. So a great group of individuals and with a nice cross-community stakeholder look at just believing in kids and planting those seeds and teaching hope.
The only disadvantage I see with sending you in it is just that it's during the school year, so that you just won't be present for the kids. But it is a free cost because, like you said, it's all absorbed with your grant money, right? So it's not costing your district anything except not having them here for a meeting. So it sounds like a good opportunity. It's something that, again, the behavior ad hoc committee has talked about several times with Kids at Home. Matter of fact, Lisa Quistorf has come and even spoken with us in the past. So I guess I would hope, from my point of view, without a planned term, I'm not going to do that, but maybe if you could come back to us and report what you learned and share with us what kind of encouraging words that you heard and how we can use that would be great sometime this fall. So with that, do you have any questions, guys?
No, I don't have any questions at this moment.
Okay, Tony?
Yeah, so I've heard about this program before, but can you give me a better understanding of what exactly they do?
Sure, it's not a program. That's the first thing I'll teach you. It's a philosophy, it's a belief system. So it entails 3 universal truths. The first is we believe all kids can succeed, no exceptions. So it's not all kids, but maybe not Lynette because she's had these issues or problems. So that's number 1, believing. The second is connecting. I mean, it's important for kids to have meaningful and sustainable relationships with adults. And the third is about time traveling. So people ask, how do you define hope? And hope is about the ability to see your future. And oftentimes when we talk with kids about hope, we talk about what do you want to be when you grow up? And it's really focused on education and career, which is super important. But Kids at Hope really blossoms that and says education and career, home and family, community and service, hobbies and recreation. What do you want to do for fun? What do you want to do to give back to your community? What kind of house do you live in? Do you want to be a parent? What kind of significant other do you want to be? And so time traveling, so we time travel. We go to their future in those 4 different destinations, come back to the present and prepare for the journey. So hope is taught and learned. We know that, right? Like the research is really clear about that kids can be taught to be hopeful. And that's really what this is about. So the Masters Institute, we've been sending individuals since 2016. We actually had the opportunity 2 years ago as the pandemic was literally unfolding to sort of replicate that here in our community. We had 168 people attend our 2.5-day event where we were able to showcase what had been done in our community with Kids at Home and that philosophy. And so we are just trying to get more people to see what's been done in Phonics through ASU and the Kids at Home organization. So it includes not only presentations and learning in the classroom kind of setting for individuals who attend, it also includes 1 day of being bussed around the community and seeing Kids at Home in practice in Phoenix, which to me has been the most exciting part of ever being able to travel there and experience that. So it's one of the better events that I've been able to experience. I feel it's a really heartfelt event, and we're not looking for any data reporting or any specific outcomes. What we're trying to do is get people who have an interest in spreading the word of hope trained and understanding it better. This gives you a really good in-depth look. So we can just continue to spread it throughout our community and just hope that more and more people are interested.
Yeah. How long have we been using that philosophy here at the district?
So there've been a variety of people trained. Stacy O'Polly, when she was at Jefferson Elementary School, was one of the, she didn't attend the first year in 2016, it might have been 2017, I think that she attended, along with Kristen Lee, who works in the GED program. And so the two of them were chosen so basically, I talked to schools and school districts about who is a likely candidate to be willing and accepting of the idea of teaching kids hope. And so those two individuals were asked to attend, and they did attend. And so Stacy used that philosophy at Jefferson. She's now at Madison Elementary School, and she's continued to carry that effort there. The Kids at Hope Board was here in October last year, I think. We were in Mass, I remember that, so I think it was last year. And they did visit the Two Rivers School District. They also visited Madison Elementary School so that we could let them see what we were doing with Kids at Hope here in our community. Jenny Schneider, when she was the school social worker at Washington, also attended. She has now left the district and is with the Two Rivers School District. So I don't know if I even remember what your question was, but that's kind of the input that we've had with Manitowoc so far. There's, I think, a lot of talk about it. Two Rivers has implemented district-wide the Kids at Hope philosophy. So if they pop up if the teachers pop up their computers, the Kids at Hope pledge or the Treasure Hunters pledge for the adults is on there. When the kids open up their Chromebooks or whatever they use there in Two Rivers, the pledge comes out, reminding them that they're a kid at Hope, they're talented, smart, capable of success, they have dreams for their future, and they'll rise to reach those goals and dreams every day. So there's, if you went to the Two Rivers School District, you will see things on the walls, and it's embedded sort of in the culture of how they work with kids.
So it's pretty new, it sounds like.
Yeah, our first event was in October of 2015. We had Rick Miller, who was the founder and at that time CEO of Kids at Hope, and Antoine Fisher from the Antoine Fisher movie. The story Antoine Fisher, that movie was based off of Antoine Fisher's life. Denzel Washington played in that motion picture, and Antoine was here to sort of share his story with us at a community event at Silver Lake. So we've done a variety of community events. We also had Erin Grewal here, whose story was featured in the movie Freedom Writers. We had, I'm trying to think of who was here, probably here for the Masters, that we put on here, a Power and Hope event. We had several national speakers that came in and spoke. So yeah, we've been doing it and training people about 2 or 3 times a year. I will host trainings just on sort of the one-on-one. It's about a 3-hour, 2.5, 3-hour training where we talk about believing, connecting, and time traveling. So yeah, we've been planting seeds, and as you can tell by the large group that we're sending this year, and just a variety from YMCA to CASA to schools to Northeast Wisconsin Area Health Education Center. It's just a nice, I think, cross-representation of our community and trying to work together about what does our community have to offer for kids? Can we really believe in kids and work with them to be hopeful and productive individuals in our community?
I have a question for you. How do you, again, I'm going to use the word hope, how do you hope to use this within our school district? What do you think you'll gain from it? And a whole different kind of question is, how are you going to take care of being away for a week? Is there anyone who's going to kind of rise up into your shoes during that week's time in September?
Yeah, so I think the biggest benefit that I see of going is all the connections of all these community members that are going to be coming together and doing this learning together. Also, I think as we look at what we're doing across the district and how do the things that we're already doing in little pockets here and there, how do they fit together? And really, for myself, to gain more knowledge of Kids at Hope and to see how that fits with what we're doing or what direction we're going into, and have more knowledge of the philosophy, the beliefs, the practices, see what it looks like in places that are doing it, and how that might work with, or if it doesn't, if I believe, well, I don't know if this does work with what we are doing. So I think that those are kind of like the big two things I hope to get out of attending. As far as my time away, I don't get a substitute. So it'll just be planning for, that time away and how I can get things done beforehand. A lot of things can be done virtually now. We've seen that. So it's not, because I'm in Phoenix doesn't mean that I'm not able to be reached by, phone. Virtual meetings can still happen and things if needed, so.
Sounds like good. Good question.
Yeah, I mean, I'm maybe with provider, right? I would like some information, maybe some tutorial or something of the content, that you're presented at, so that we can have some review over it. Our community members would probably want review of it too before, we adopted it. We already adopted it, but some transparency to our community would be much appreciated. So that's all I would really ask for. Maybe it's been provided already.
So is that something that you're looking for before or
No,
that after?
I would approve it today. It's just, I would like to have some transparency. That's all.
Very easy to look up to, just so anyone watching knows. I mean, it's just that kids at home. If you look that up, it'll pop up right for you too. You can see what they're all
That's
about.
specifically what I would suggest if you want to get a quick 20 minutes. This is Kids at Home. Rick Miller does a TED Talk, and I'd be happy. I think I just shared today with you finally remember to send you the link. It's 22 minutes and some odd seconds, but he is the individual who began researching this in the 90s. And, his thought was, we're talking about all these people being at risk. Like, what's wrong with that? Like, there's funding for kids at risk of pregnancy. There's funding for kids at risk of being involved in gangs. And he said, let's shift that perspective. Instead of thinking about kids being at risk, let's think about them as at home. How do we focus on that? Because if we focus on that, we'll probably get better outcomes. So sort of the philosophy about that is, if I'm picking up, for instance, Antoine Fisher's file as a social worker, and I'm looking at it going, wow, born in prison, dad died of a gunshot wound before he was even born. He was in foster care, he was abused, he was neglected, he was emancipated and living on the streets. If I take all that information, I can't control any of that risk. I can't change any of those things that happened to that person named Antoine. But if I use the framework of Kids at Hope and I turn that back out and I look through this lens, we believe, the foundation, we believe all kids can succeed, no exceptions. We believe kids need meaningful, sustaining relationships with adults, and there's 4 different definitions for those different people, different adults and kids like, and we time travel to those 4 destinations. So we use that framework to think about the individuals that we're working with. It won't be that, oh my goodness, this is a horrible situation. How am I going to fix all of these things? I can't. All of those things that happen to that individual. I need to turn that back out and teach them how to be a hopeful person, how to be a productive member of our community. So that's kind of a one-on-one version.
Yeah, that sounds really interesting. So I'm taking it geared more towards disadvantaged students or students that have had some trauma in their lives.
No, it's actually, that's the cool thing about it. It's for all kids. We really talk about all kids, no exceptions. So a lot of times, even kids who aren't disadvantaged have some things that have happened in their backgrounds and their histories that maybe we don't even know about. So it really is that we should believe this for all kids. And we don't tolerate people who don't believe it, that kids are hopeful, that kids should have a hopeful future. And so it gives a common framework to be able, a common language to be able to have sometimes conversations about how we need to not give up on kids. We can't let kids fall through the cracks. We're going to do what we can to get them connected to meaningful adults, believe in them, and then really get them to think about their future and help them with that journey.
So I'm curious, it sounds like, if I heard you right, this started back in 2009. Did I hear that right?
Rick Miller started researching this in the 90s.
Okay.
Yeah.
So has there been any research or data that shows the philosophy has been implemented in districts and we've seen some sort of measurable improvement?
Yeah, I definitely, there is some things out there. I could definitely send some information. There's a sort of 2-page, it gives a little bit of a 101, and then there's some outcomes on there that the Kids at Hope organization talked about. They also joined ASU in 2018, I believe, 2018, so that the students at ASU could do some additional research. So that's happening right now. I haven't seen any research come out of ASU yet, but they are part of the Advanced Study for Science and Hope, I think it's called.
Yeah, I'd like to see that if you could send that.
For sure.
I mean, everything sounds good, and, you know, honestly, you know, from my seat, you hope that people would be doing that anyway, but, you know, I'd be interested to see what kind of impact it's had in districts that have had it longer, so.
Yeah, it's interesting because the conversation we have about this sometimes as we're talking about how do you really implement and how do we keep the momentum going is exactly that, Tony. It's so simple. You believe in kids, you connect with them, you time travel, but it's so complex. Like understanding that and even believing it is a pretty easy thing to do. Practicing it every day, all day with all kids is a pretty difficult, like it's really complex. When you really think about how you put it into practice. And if Lynette can't do it today with Tony, maybe I need to step in and help out because we don't want that relationship to be tarnished or to be problematic. So it's really about this sort of simplistic idea, like, yeah, okay, that makes sense, but how do you really practice that every day with all kids? And then it becomes a little bit more complex.
Thank you. If there are any more questions, then I'll look for a motion to take this to the full board.
I'll make a motion.
All right, yeah.
Second.
Okay, thank you, Tony. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All right, thanks, guys. Thank you. Take it to the full board. We'll take a look at on Tuesday. Yes. I'm struggling to sound like okay, next on our agenda is our hopefully somewhat short literacy update from Pam.
It'll be quick and short.
Okay.
We gave this update to the previous board members, and so Kathy just asked if I would update you so that you're kind of in the loop as well. So I'm just going to talk about, we are in the process of doing a literacy resource review from kindergarten through 8th grade. And so just to give you a bit of background, we did in December, between December and February, we did some surveying of our K-8 staff, both classroom teachers, special education teachers, reading teachers, EL teachers, English learner teachers, and our billing administrators, to ask some questions about what are the things that are important in a high quality literacy resource. So we asked them to kind of rate some different characteristics, things like having differentiated materials, having some resources that will allow for student choice, having enough additional materials to kind of support different texts and things like that. So just a variety of things. Ask them to rate those in the level of importance, and then to rate them in terms of how well our current resource, which is the units of study from Teachers College, how well our resource meets that. Based upon that data, we saw some gaps. We saw some disconnects. One of the biggest disconnects was between how important our teachers felt and staff felt it was to meet the needs of our different populations of learners, like our English learners and our special education students, and how well our resource was providing that support. So based upon that, we decided that we would go down the route of doing an investigation of other options. And so that happened in December through February. When we got that information and said, yep, we've got a gap here, we're gonna bring some folks together to do a study. In February and March, we sought out folks to be on a committee that's going to do this work. And so try to make sure that we have representation from all of the buildings, all of the different grade levels, all of the different specialist groups, administrators, and things, and try to pull in a mix of people who felt really strongly that they liked the units of study, and folks who said, I don't like this at all. And so try to get a mix of different. So we have a nice sized team. We did group them into cohorts K2, 3, 5, and 6, 8. for down the road as we investigate the resource, just to give them a specific lens to look for, because K2 has some components in a typical literacy resource that 3.5 and 6.8 would not necessarily have. So just wanted to do that. So that team met in April. We met with them, gave them an overview of the work that they were being asked to do, talked with them about the data, our literacy data, and shared with them the survey results so they knew why we were asking them to engage in the work, and then kind of shared with them a plan for what their work into summer and fall is going to look like as a part of this review team. We also asked for their feedback on a criteria document so that as we start to look at other resources, we can use some specific criteria and consistent criteria through that. So I worked with our literacy specialists in the district to start a draft of a document, and that team took a look at it and gave a ton of feedback to us. And so now we are in the process of working to revise that document so that by the time the team comes together in the fall to actually look at resources, they have that criteria to use for that part. In the summer now, we have to, before we can go into digging into the resources, we do have to spend some time at the K5 level, making sure that our power standards are reviewed and updated. And so 6.8 has already done that throughout the school year, but the K5 group will come together in the summer to do that, just to make sure that as we're looking at resources, we're making sure there's a standards alignment, and those standards are identified that we're going to check for the alignment. So they're going to do that in, hopefully in June, and then that kind of puts a little bit of a lull on the work until fall. In the fall, we have identified through Ed Reports as an organization that does kind of a review of different resource materials, and we use that that information to identify a couple of resources that we will look at to start, and are having some vendors come and meet with the committee to give an overview of the resource, kind of showcase what the resource has to offer from the vendor's perspective. And then we will have those samples on hand for the committee to really dig into and look at and use that evaluation criteria to do some rating of the resource against that criteria. At the end of that, we figure that will take us probably till about the end of November. We'll ask the team, take all that data, and we'll ask the team, does anything look like it's going to meet our needs? And if they identify a resource that is going to meet their needs, we'll ask them if they're ready to make a recommendation to the committee, to the curriculum committee and the board on that resource. There are some other, other things that happen after that, but that's kind of where we were at. If they're not ready, then we'll go back to the drawing board and look at some other resources as well. So I can't really tell you definitively when we'd be bringing a recommendation to you, other than we hope, probably around November, December, if one of these resources really seems to meet the criteria. If the team says, no way, these aren't what we want, then we're going to be back to the drawing board, but we'll keep you updated on that. So I have assured them that their input is going to be most valuable to us because they're the experts and the ones they're using. If they do make a recommendation and the board is interested in moving forward, we have talked about using that same committee then to help us define what is the professional development that needs to go into place ahead of people using the resource and kind of getting it going. So at the earliest, we would be looking at the following fall to do any kind of implementation. We wouldn't do it mid-year or anything like that. But again, it's going to depend on the resource, when they choose it and when the board would adopt something, and then how much professional development is needed. So that was a lot of information. I apologize, but I just wanted to kind of get you into the loop on that piece, because that is something that you'll be hearing more about as we go into, especially as we go into next year. Yeah.
So to summarize, you said English as a second language and special ed were the criteria that we were looking at, that we were trying to focus on for literacy improvement?
That was one of the key areas that was the biggest gap But there were a lot of different factors. We had everything from choice, student choice, to how, does it have any social emotional integration? Does it have any science and social studies content integration? Does it represent different cultures? Are there assessments already provided? So there was just a bunch of different factors, but when we asked the staff to rate all of those components as how important they were, and then we said, okay, now that you've rated them in order of importance, tell us how well our current resource does on each of those, and meeting each of those components. The biggest gap between how important the staff saw it to be and how well or not well in this case, our resource was in meeting that was between those special,
Those two things.
yeah, those two things. And so it's just one of the factors that, you know, kind of led us to say, okay, we looked at a lot of the different qualities. There were several of them that were negatively, you know, in terms of that gap, there was a negative gap there, which meant that there was a problem, but the biggest one was in that area. So.
Yeah, I'm concerned about English as a second language, obviously, because I think our enrollment's gonna be going up considerably. So we need to be proactive, you know, as soon as possible to have that resource there for those children.
And you know, kudos
If
to,
there's a gap, obviously, which the staff
Absolutely.
said there is, so.
absolutely, kudos to our teachers. Really, our teachers were saying, you know, we have some concerns, we have some needs. And then, you know, the survey just brought that information forward, and we had great participation in the survey. People were honest. We asked for comments so that we knew kind of what they were honing in on when they were doing their ratings on the survey. So they provided us with a wealth of information to use as we move forward.
And when does the ed report come out?
The Ed Reports is a ongoing, it's a system by which that organization takes a look at resources and rates them on different qualities, and then they give like a rating of this one meets expectations, this one does not meet expectations, this meets some of the things and not. So we tried to go to that resource to identify resources that met all expectations as a starting point. And looked at the two resources that we've identified actually are going to have updates coming up in this next year. So we'll have the freshest, newest versions of them to be able to review and to take a look at. But again, it was picking a couple to start with, knowing that there are thousands of things out there. We tried to find a few that were in that meets expectations, seem to have some of the qualities we're looking for, and the committee will dig into it and let us know if that's accurate. And if they come back and they say, no, these are not what we're looking for, then we will go back and pick and look at some other options. So it's a plan, but it's a tentative plan based upon the work that the team will do.
And when's the last time that we have updated our resources? Now, when we say resources, I mean, are we talking textbooks and online articles or information, or how are we categorizing?
Yeah, in literacy, the resource really is the kind of the teacher's manual, if you will, and then the materials that come with it. So in the example of units of study, there are mentor texts that come with the resources. There's some additional recommendations for like classroom libraries, things like that. So there's pieces and parts, but the bulk of it is a teacher guide to how to implement. Many of the literacy curriculums are very similar, you know, in that they will have those teacher guides, and then because it's so heavy into getting students into text to read, it's based upon bringing like books, you know, actual books, and it's recommended books into that. Occasionally, like our Phonics curriculum also has some additional materials, manipulatives and things like that to make learning letters and sounds and things fun. So that's what we're talking about in terms of resources that these vendors will present to the team.
In November?
We have them scheduled for September, so there's one in September, and that'll give folks the opportunity to hear the vendor, and then we want to give teachers time to be able, on their own time, to be able to dig into the resource and really just look at everything and kind of tear it apart. So we are trying to give a month per resource. We are including our units of study because we do want them to go back and just do the criteria that they set against that as our current resource. So we have the 2 new options and then units of study. So September, October, and November. So kind of shooting for the end of November, December.
So, and how will this affect how we use Lucy Calkins? Are we going to get rid of that program? Is that what we're looking at?
We won't until the team, if the team would make a decision that definitely is not the resource we want to continue to use, and we identified something else. So for right now, it's status quo. That's our resource that was adopted.
Units of study is a resource.
Is our resource, and I apologize, I don't know when it was officially adopted, that was before my time, but, it's been, at least 5-6 years.
There must be constant updates, so there's new additions that come out.
They do,
So-
yeah, they do update things, but for now, we are looking at, we're not gonna purchase any updates
Yeah, are
for
we
next year.
subscribing to
We'll
it?
just kind of hold status quo with what we've got, but I do, it's important to note that we do want our classroom teachers to still be implementing that curriculum resource, because that is the resource that we have for literacy right now, and then we'll move forward once we identify something.
Are you supplementing right now for the gap that
Yeah,
we're seeing?
yeah, we have our special ed staff and our English learner staff are working in conjunction with classroom teachers to do some of that. Our classroom teachers are doing some of that already. It's just because it's not there, it's not consistent, in terms of what resource I've been grabbing. And so we're looking at trying to build more consistent support and options for them to be able to help. So having the special ed teachers and the English learner teachers be a part of those planning conversations helps, because then they can really target it to individual needs.
Is there a preferred reference right now for a resource that they're supplementing that they like, that they've spoken out to you about already?
Not that I'm aware of.
Okay.
I know that it's much more individualized.
Obviously, of course.
And to be honest with you, the units of study are designed for teachers to work with when students have either, gaps that they want to address, or they have, some enrichment needs. Teachers can use a small group and a individual conferring model to be able to help kind of provide some of that additional support. And a lot of that is driven around just good questioning around text. So it's not necessarily another resource, it's just good questioning around text. We did add the phonics within the last few years, because of the fact that we were seeing that those early grade levels were saying the phonics was weak. And so that's been something that I think was positive, but again, that's a component of the broader picture.
Thank you.
How do you guys measure the effectiveness of whatever Lucy Calkins you said, right?
Mhm.
How do you guys, I'm just curious, from your point of view.
We use the data, definitely our achievement data. So at the early grade levels, we look at PALS to determine, students are making progress on some of those early literacy skills. And then certainly the forward in the 3 through 8. But we also look at, our teacher feedback in terms of how are the teachers seeing students respond to the resource, and from the lens of the materials that the teachers are able to use to engage students. And that, that phonics piece was one that they said, it's a weak piece. So we looked at the units of study for phonics for 2 reasons. One is because it was aligned to what we already had, which was the reading and writing units of study. So there was some correlation there that they could then infuse that right into the workshop. And then the other piece was that they had some kind of fun things, like they each have a little mascot. And so it's like a lion that kids learn phonics from the lion, so it's just kind of a fun thing. But those are those components that, we want that feedback as well, because teachers are seeing how well the students are getting excited about literacy through some of it.
So why do you think the scores have been declining, predating COVID? And how can we as a board and a district address that? Do you think new curriculum is the answer, or new resources?
I think it's a little bit to what Stacy was talking about with kind of that Kids at Hope piece. It's a balance of the resource being appropriate and providing enough options and engagement. But it also is how do we help grow strategies for our teachers and build their capacity. And so our reading teachers have been working really hard to try to push into classrooms to help provide some of that support, help to guide teachers if they're looking for strategies for students that are struggling. So, you know, there are efforts being made to address some of those things. Our English learner teachers are also working with students, but really working in pushing into classrooms to provide more support as well to help address some of that decline. In terms of why the decline, I don't know if I have an expert answer in terms of the absolutes. I think there's a lot of factors, everything from, you know, the engagement issues that we've had over the last few years with the kind of the craziness that has been in the world. I think we have a technology-rich society that's a blessing and a curse. The blessing is that we have easy access to a lot of things. Sometimes the curse is that the actual book isn't as exciting. And so we don't have students reading as much and as avidly as we may have had years ago. And so trying to encourage students to find those reading resources that they really enjoy and get them into the actual books so that they're used to, and teaching them how to use technology as a way to read online as well. So incorporating that in there. And you know, we have students that have disability needs, we have students that have language barriers. And so to some extent, we have to address those pieces in order to continue to make that progress. And so we have to look at their growth over time because proficiency might come a little bit. And those pieces I can look at.
Yeah, just trying to understand how we could get it moving in the other direction.
Yeah, I think it's going to be, you know, multiple different avenues from, you know, really looking at how our support services really do dig in and provide support both to students and staff, looking at how our teachers are continuing to grow their practice in terms of those reading fundamentals and skills, and then taking a look at a resource that really allows for that to be kind of seamless, but that engages kids. And then getting a lot of kids in our or a lot of books in our library that kids are.
That question. Have we looked into a way of reporting to our families the amount of growth from each individual student? I know it seems like a really simple question, but I mean, I understand that if we're below basic or below even novice, if we can report to our families in the community of how much they've grown from where they've started, that could be a good indicator of the quality of service we are providing for our children.
At our elementary level, our report cards are based upon those literacy standards. And so the teachers, when they report on the report cards, are communicating that information towards those standards to some extent. Yeah. And then with each of our assessments, you know, there are parent reports that are provided. So in probably late summer, early start of the school year, parents get an individual student report for the forward assessment. And so that document provides some indication of where their children are in different skill sets that are aligned again to those stages.
So we do have something in place for the district to show the parents the amount of growth that a student has had in their literacy.
Yeah, it gives some information. I mean, it's not maybe as individualized as what a parent might find out from a teacher at a parent-teacher conference, but it does give kind of that overview of where the students are at on those skills.
Yeah, I just think that the district would benefit from seeing the amount of growth from where English as second language student comes in, and then we can compare that to why our literacy is low, if it is low, which obviously it is, and then we can kind of prove that we're improving on that student individually. And, we started somewhere and we've got to somewhere else now. So,
And for the English learner students, I do track that data, and I can share that fresh data with you in the fall when the state, right now, all of our data from this school year, so our 2021 data is all embargoed by the state until they release those state report cards. So once that's released, then I can share kind of that information with you as a board, and I'd be happy to do that, to let you know, where were students and how much growth I was seeing. So that I can tell you that I'm a bit
our
excited.
constituents want to see it.
Right. And we can do that. We just can't do it publicly until the data is unembargoed by the state. And so we'll do that, but I can tell you that I've looked at our data and I've done some of that data analysis, and we have some growth. And it's exciting, but it also is, there's always room for more. And so we're always going to continue to shoot, but it gives us an opportunity to set some goals towards that.
So can you share that with us before October?
I can't.
Okay.
I have to wait until the state does an official unembargoing of the data, and then I can share it, because right now it's considered embargoed and only to be used for like our in-district action planning process. But because you are public, the state views the board as a public piece and these meetings as public, it's embargoed, so I can't share it until they give the all. And that typically is around the time they're ready to release those report cards. So, but I will as soon as that occurs.
But you can still start an action plan for where we can grow, and then you can present it to us in fall.
Yeah,
So-
yeah, you won't be able to see the exact data, so the data breakdown of each, but you'll be able to see through the action plans what data sets each school kind of centered in on when they do their summer data review. So you'll get a little bit of information ahead about some of the bigger information.
Okay, so guys, that was a lot longer than we kind of hoped for, just because we're after 6 already, and we're only on point number 3. No, I'm going into number 4. So we can obviously, at any meeting you want to, get more updates and ask more questions of Pam or Jason in the future too. It's a great segue into our textbook adoption, because that's what we're looking into right now, is what resources we have. So let's go on to textbooks and textbook adoption and what is the procedure behind that? I don't know which one of you is going to take that on.
Yeah, it was unclear.
Pam actually did a lot of that already, so.
I was unclear as to the expectation.
What that was?
Right.
Oh, sorry, okay.
So what I have, I worked on a couple things,
Yeah.
and so if there are questions, I'd be happy to answer. One is that we do have a policy, it's 2510, that outlines the adoption of textbooks, and then printed copies for everyone, but it's online. Last year with the curriculum committee, or this school year, I should say, we worked with the curriculum committee to gather the textbooks that we are aware of, or that we have in the district, and those are listed on our website. And the last thing that I had prepared, and ended up being a little unclear as to the goal here, was I printed our plan from Bridges. So Bridges is our K-5 math resource, and we did a 3-year adoption process. And so I can speak to that process, which is going to be really similar to what Pam just talked about as it relates to literacy. And so this stems from 2019. And so there was a lot of work that really mirrored or paralleled what Pam just talked about, working with teams to identify some vendors that matched what we were looking for and matched the standards. And that work was continuously shared with the curriculum committee. And we asked on August 13th of 2019 for approval from the curriculum committee to move forward and moving with Bridges. And that moving forward, that support for that moving forward really triggered a couple things. And so August 13th of 2019, through August 22nd of 2019, we made bridges materials available for public inspection. And so what that means is we have bridges materials in the student learning office, and we noticed that any public could come and take a look at that. At the same time, we held parent nights, or a parent night, around bridges materials on September 24th of 2019. And we're available for any questions around those bridges materials. The next thing we did, Lori Williams is our K-12 math guru. She did some building visits. So on October 1st, Lori met with 2019, met with building leaders, our elementary leaders, to make sure they were in the know on the same page as relates to bridges. The next thing that we did was Lori spent time in each building from October 9th through November 26th of 2019, and spent the day in each of our elementary buildings, allowing staff members to really ask questions, see the materials, play with the materials, and become more familiar. And then that all led up to October 22nd of 2019, where we asked for final approval from the Board of Education. Those are the things that I was prepared to speak of.
Yeah, it's just kind of showing the process, kind of an idea, especially knowing we have some that possibly coming up with literacy. It's good to know what the future holds, what we'll be looking at. So, you guys have any questions about that?
You said the bridges was a 3-year contract or a 3-year agreement, we're 3-year process.
Mm-hmm.
So we are in year 3 now, obviously.
Yeah, we added a 0.5 last year, and so really because it was during the pandemic. So the first year we thought about the work that really was parallel came, right? We identified teams, we brought the teams together to look at a number of vendors, spent some time really digging into the standards and how those vendors and standards match. Once this process that I just spoke of was we had approval from the board for bridges, the next year we did a book study. We didn't talk about bridges. So we did an elementary book study about the instructional strategies that are really great for teaching elementary math. And I say that 0.5 because the next year, which is last year, we executed the implementation of bridges. And so we know that forever, last year we'll have an asterisk by it. So this year we're kind of counting it as 0.5. So this is kind of second year, but the second year of 0.5 implementation. And all along, just the professional development of Pam really has matched, right? And so we've been working with Pam and Jen, Lori and I, so next year we'll see kind of the concluding of Bridges professional development in December, January, and then taking over for literacy. So we're working on it.
This is just K-5.
The Bridges, yes. Yeah.
Good little overview, thank you so much.
You will?
And then next we have on our list is behavior updates. So I think that you were going to speak to the behavior committee and how, or to our group here and how we met with ad hoc and so forth. And then also we have Linda with us, Linda Groth, and she will help support if we have any questions from the ad hoc committee. I call her Gigi, you know why I've nicknamed her, so. I tend to do that now and not call her Linda, so. Yeah, so if we have any questions too coming with ad hoc, that she's here for to answer questions.
Sure, I wrote down a couple notes, just an update, right? We want to give you an update about where the discussions have been and where they're going around behaviors. And so the first one I wrote down here is that I think the behavior baton has officially been handed from Mr. Holzman to the student learning office. So that was the first thing I wrote down. And once that baton was passed, Pam and I worked on a draft, we call it draft timeline of the behavior work. And I think it's 3 pages, really going from May 6th to, I believe, the beginning of September. And what's the work of the student learning office as it relates to behaviors, the work of the ad hoc committee as it relates to behaviors, and what's the work of the curriculum committee, and then how do we expand that to buildings. And so on May 6th, Kathy, Pam, and I kind of looked over that draft. Thank you, Lord, appreciate it. Thanks. Keeps asking over here. And so we know that's a draft. Kathy was kind enough to take that draft timeline to that ad hoc committee and walk through that. And the ad hoc committee had also drafted a timeline. And so Kathy did a phenomenal job of bringing some of those ad hoc members together with Mr. Holzman, Pam, and I. I don't remember the day, but this week, 3 members, Kathy included, of that ad hoc committee, Mark, Pam, and I just met and really talked through the student learning office timeline, the ad hoc committee timeline. And so I'm going to take some time over this weekend to try to combine those 2 timelines to create a draft 2.0. And Kathy, Pam, and I are meeting on Monday, May 23rd, to review that. So that's kind of where we've been in the last several weeks here. We're hoping that the next steps will be, once we're more comfortable with that timeline that's been merged, ad hoc student learning office, we bring that to the ad hoc for their feedback. We bring that to the curriculum committee for your feedback. So those are 2 steps in the future. We want to bring those teams together. And then finally, there's a lot of other things, but another big step would be to form a district level behavior team. And that's part of the time. What did I miss, Pam, Kathy, please? Gigi?
Gigi. Otherwise known as Linda. Do you have anything you'd like to add, Linda, about what we're doing with the ad hoc committee so that the guys understand? This is really their first big exposure to it, so.
Well, I think they've heard from Kathy in the past about when we started this committee, and we've been meeting almost every week now for about 3.5 months. And I think the thing that we want to make sure happens, because when we surveyed the teachers, we were absolutely blown away by their responses and about their concerns. And I think that the fact that the district is starting to look at this more now, and Mr. Holzman, I know, brought it forth to the community that this was a crisis situation. And that's what we were hearing from the teachers too, that it's good that the committee here looks at that carefully. And when Jason puts those 2 plans together, I think that that's a great opportunity for the curriculum committee and the school board to really get some ownership in this plan, because it's going to be just majorly important for the kids as we move forward. And I think the thing that the committee really wanted to emphasize was getting the teachers involved right away from the beginning with the development of this plan, because they have the firsthand knowledge of what's been happening. So we think that's very important. We also want to make sure that it's a district-wide plan, K through 12, and so that there's real continuity when the kids move from school to school or class to class, that the expectations are the same and they know what those are. And there are consequences built into this plan, so that if the children aren't doing what they need to be doing, that there is some accountability there, and that there are supports put in place for the teachers. So that's basically our thoughts as a committee. And we just really appreciate the fact that the administration and the school board and the teachers, everyone has been working on this together to move this forward. So thank you.
Another key piece to that to mention too, though, is how much we're going to try to promote this within families or from in the places our kids live, that this will be a piece that will be communicated with wherever they're coming from, that those pieces will be sent home, so that we also hopefully garner some of that relationship from whatever home environment they come from too. So we're trying to take the whole child into perspective here. So that's just where we're at. Do you guys have any questions? And by the way, she's a former board president. I wanted to mention that. So I wanted to honor that, actually. It's a big job, right, Stacey?
Yes,
So,
but she did it fabulously.
yeah.
She paved the way for
Yeah,
future school board members.
everyone looks better after me.
So, yeah, is there anything you guys have for questions on Jason, Pam, or, well, I guess myself too, or Gigi?
The streamlining between the two plans, has it come together? Obviously, I received it a week ago. Has it been updated since, or?
That's what,
Obviously, the disciplinary was a big issue. Has that been addressed yet? Or are we gonna wait for the committee meeting next time?
as far as what part are you, yeah, what part are you looking
The transition of the ad hoc committee's information, and then obviously your draft. Have you started putting it together, or you're preparing it for the next next committee meeting? Obviously, that's my question.
I have not seen the ad hoc timeline until this week.
Really?
Yes.
Okay.
And so we have an electronic version of that now, so this weekend I will spend time trying to merge the ad hoc student learning office with the goal of Kathy, Pam, and I reviewing and revising that Monday. And then again, the plan would be to get some feedback from the ad hoc committee, get feedback from the curriculum committee, and then begin to execute the plan.
Yeah, and you guys, if you want to let me know ahead of time, you're welcome to attend. We do it virtually, our ad hoc meetings. So if you would like to attend those ever, feel free to do that. Just get in touch with me so we can make that, make that announcement. I think I think we'd be okay. But either way, we should just put that on the agenda that you'd be attending. So, but you're more than welcome to be part of any of that. So it's a big project for everybody. Part of the reason that the ad hoc started, we met for a long time, but we kind of saw ourselves as like a satellite group, right? We were just kind of out there trying to do something about this. So when Mark handed off that baton now, we're moving pretty quickly actually all of a sudden, where all those kind of groups are forming together to try to come up with a real action plan that we can hit the schools with before the beginning of the school year. Something that has to happen with training and those kinds of things. So we're working together to come up with what that means and what that looks like. And you two are included on that, but this is our first opportunity to do so. But again, anytime you would like to have questions about it, anyone from ad hoc would be happy. I'm sure these two would, you're always welcome to attend also. Any more to add to that, you think, Jason?
Not at
Or
this
Gigi,
time,
do you
no.
have anything to add? Okay, so that's just kind of where we're at right now, and we will bring a plan forward to you as it progresses. So we're melding right now the two plans together is where we're at, so. All right. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
And by the way, the Kids at Hope piece, I see that working coincide with what we're doing with behavior, because actually, you probably verbalize this better than I would, but that's a belief system, and the behavior system we're trying to come up with is more of an action plan about what happens in the schools and expectations for kids and codes of conduct. Where Kids at Hope is about reaching inside of them. Does that make sense?
Mhm.
If I could just comment real quick too.
Sure.
I think it's a good idea. I think you mentioned it, but to send something to the parents so they know what's going on with that plan.
Yeah.
Because I think if we can enroll them in that process, that's just gonna increase the likelihood of success. So I think that's a good idea.
Absolutely. And we're fully aware of that. That's one key piece that all the groups have talked about before. You need all, and not just home, but community members too. This is a broad issue. This isn't just our school district. This is everywhere. So the more people who are aware and understand what's going on and help us overcome some of these issues, the better. So that's really how we view it. But absolutely, family, community, the whole thing, which is kind of nice now having Kids at Home, that whole piece here today, because that is community. It's going into the community, not just in the schools now. So I look forward to seeing how that might work.
Kathy, that just made me think of one other thing. part of the code of conduct, we actually have at the board right now, a code of conduct policy, 5500. And if you look at that, it talks about how we should go about putting this into action. And it talks about who should be involved as far as the committee to come up with a plan for a code of conduct. So it's interesting to take a look at that. And that's something that you'll probably want to look at it as a board to see if you need to refine that or make any revisions or whatever. But there is a beginning there.
Yeah, and that actually is part of our plan. We've listed 5,500 and there's another line, 20.
I forget
The
the
cell
number,
phone.
but it's cell
It's
phone
the cell
policy.
phone, yes,
So-
electronics policy. So we'll be addressing both of those within our committee too in these upcoming months before the school year. But that actually has a part of the timeline.
I just want to say one thing to what Tony said. I reached out to one of our teachers who's resigning, and I think this might be the only school district that she's ever worked in. And she's at one of our difficult schools. And one of the comments that she made was, teachers and administrators do not have control. That power lies with the kid who blatantly tells me every day when I ask them to stay in their assigned location or to join the lesson or to stop talking when I'm trying to teach. You can't make me. Or let's see you try. And then there's a expletive word there that you can imagine. When this happens, we are to call the office when that occurs and contact parents to make a plan, but nothing ever happens and kids know it. The compliant kids are the ones who suffer, trying to learn through the chaos. I'm hopeful that new members can make some major change as far as holding parents accountable for their child's behavior. So I think that, not only another buy-in important piece is that the parents also need to know the expectations for what is expected for their child when they come to school, and also what the consequences might be that we need to do. And so it just sounds like from the frustration of this particular teacher that even if the parents are called, that it's not really resonating and doing much. Whereas, I remember, probably my grandparents or somebody telling me, that you knew that it was way worse getting in trouble if your parents were called, right? Than if it were just the teacher, because you knew at home it was going to be worse. And it just doesn't sound like that is happening or there's something going on. So definitely the parents need to be part of this and know, kind of what's going on and what we expect and how they can help us too.
We have a real advantage with the ad hoc committee because we've had these months already of meeting where we're having a Pam and Jason come in right now. They're at a disadvantage because it's basically been like a week, right? I mean, you guys had to start coming up with timeline and stuff. So the ad hoc committee has been really great because we've had lots of time to talk through these things, and we're really aware of the needs that we have in a family environment or the home setting that may not even be much, whatever their family makeup is. And that we've talked about those pieces about even down the road, which might be part of the plan, but not initially of, how do we support those kids and those families? Is there a way to connect with, community service groups that put on parenting classes? So we've had those kinds of discussions, like in very broad terms about what kinds of things can we look at, that it's not just about a child showing up at school and learning how to sit in their seat. There's a whole much, so much more to it than that. But we have to take care of kind of level one, the very beginning, the foundation first, and we can keep adding to that. And I think that's part of the hope, is having all of these individuals coming together, all of us included now. There's even more now with ideas and plans to move forward, because it's not something we're going to solve overnight. I think everyone is aware of that. And no matter what program you buy into, it's not something that we're going to see in a matter of 2 months in our schools, and it's all of a sudden going to be great and dandy, and we're not having issues. gotta have this buy-in for a long time. So that's what our work is for a long time. But I'm excited about it, because I think there's lots of potential here, and I think if kids do believe in themselves and can hope for their futures, and we can show them that way, and show them the way to do those things, it's an exciting time, right? We can make it better for them, which means we make it better for our world. That sounds like such a cheesy thing to say, but it's true.
Cue the music.
Yeah, cue the music. Perfect. Someone's got a violin somewhere. Okay, I think we're kind of got that covered, unless you guys have anything to add.
Yeah, I just add to Stacy's point, we gotta find a way to reach these parents. I mean, if these kids keep acting out, then there's gotta be accountability at home. We have to find a way to get through, to fix this. I mean, this is unacceptable, what's going on.
Yeah, and it's just not a matter of, like, I'll just say Joey for some odd reason, like Joey is misbehaving, so I'm gonna make a phone call. Like, we're talking about addressing these at different levels, depending on what behavior issues there are, how many times it occurs, that there are different ways to respond to those without just simply calling home. But that certainly would be a key part of that. But it's more than just that. Now, it has to be. It used to be that's all it took, but that's not really true anymore. So hopefully we'll be able to address it from all around. Yeah.
Do we have any data on, I guess, just the rate of incidents, Mark, that you can share? I recall several months back you did something at a board meeting, but I'm just curious, has it gotten any better since then, or?
No, still the same, when we're on the pace for more in and out of school suspensions. Students struggling, controlling their own emotional well-being and self-control. We see, for the most part, it's grades 6 through 10. I think it's a complex scenario, and we can. I would recommend looking at what we can control and not what we can't. And we can't control families. Right? We have students who miss, hundreds of days of school, and we work with families on communicating and calling them, but they can't get it. Kids who, and if you have an IEP, you can only be suspended 10 days without reevaluating an IEP. You can't just kick kids out of school. They get to come back. It's a public school. So that is the challenge, right? Kids can't just kick them out for general behaviors. You have to figure out a way to kind of work with them, and parents are key. You're right, absolutely. But sometimes they're absent. They don't want to be responsible for that. So I think that's what we're seeing at that. Not all. I mean, we have great relationships with principals working hard, teachers are working hard. But we are not seeing a decline in student behavior.
Go ahead, Gigi.
Kathy, if I could say, one of the things we found out as a committee is that Manitowoc isn't alone in this. We had one speaker come and talk who works directly with school districts on developing behavior plans and addressing these issues. And she said it cuts across all the districts. I mean, it's just, and probably COVID didn't help because the kids weren't in school and they were at home and they were losing those social skills. But it is, I think it's a really good sign that Manitowoc School District is tackling this, because I think it's something that's across the board in many, many school districts in the state. So I don't think we're alone, but it's good that we're really taking a good hard look at what we can do to improve it.
And then,
Yeah, I guess I'll give my 2 minutes. I understand Mark completely with what he's trying to say, and we need to set clear expectations for our students. And we need to cherish the halls of Lincoln High School and Washington and Wilson and all of our elementaries, and hold respect to the positions that we have there in the facilities. And the children know that right now, that we're not doing that the way we should be. And I think that we can have a solution. I think we can come up with a solution. We're all intelligent enough, but we have to do things that we haven't done as of right now. We have to change it somehow. So, but by bringing respect back to the facilities, into the teachers' rooms, into the administrators, because we've lost that. And how we're going to do that, I think there has to be a way that the children can respect being in the school. And how we do that is to make sure that they know the expectations. And then, to Mark's point, we can't kick them out of school more than 10 days if they have an IEP. But maybe there's other things that we can do to promote them to be successful in that school setting, or we have to provide a different school setting for them to be successful. That's all I'll say to that point right now. So we have to start thinking outside of the box. And people before us have done it, we can do it as well. So that's all I'll say about that.
Definitely. Ever get my pepper leaves?
No. You were on the right wavelength. I have some other ideas for you.
Okay.
Besides the pepper lake.
Great, all right. You know what I'm talking about.
Afloat in the whole.
There you go. Actually, I am going to speak to that just from part of that too, is just having a pride about your school and a sense of belonging. It's kind of the pep rally idea. Like you need to try to bring some of that back somehow. And that's where thinking outside the box is really the key. All right, enough of that. And again, anytime you have questions or anything, I get very excited. You can tell I get a little bit more animated in my seat when we're talking about behavior stuff. So we'll move on to the middle school 2-person teams. And so we're looking for some information on that because Matt and Tony have not had a lot of exposure to what the 2-person teams are about, and then a possible action item on that 2-person team. So is there anyone who wants to speak as to the 2-person teams and what that is about, what it means? And I know, Joyce, you provided us with a key piece, a financial piece, which I think I told Mark at the beginning of the meeting, we did not have access to that. It was forwarded, but we were denied access. So I haven't had time to look at that piece since we've been sitting here.
I shared it with Stacy this afternoon,
Right.
so then she must have shared it, which is fine. But now you all should have access.
Okay.
I was out of the building at an appointment, so when I got back, I saw that it had been, others had requested access, so you should all have
It's
access.
enrollment. It's showing.
It's just the enrollment
It's
number?
showing 6th grade, 7th grade, 8th grade in years and the trends of the enrollment of those classes.
You want to bring me up to speed then?
Well, hang
No,
on.
I mean, just tell me more.
Just hang on a
Oh,
second.
okay.
What I would suggest is if someone in administration could give everybody the timeline. This has been talked about for a long time. And would somebody be willing to give the timeline of this? This is just a financial piece, so I don't want you to go into that quite yet.
Okay.
But so that everybody understands how we got here.
I think I can attempt to give the best panel I can think of. About 2018, when we moved to grade alignment, identified 6th grade teachers, 7th grade teachers, and 8th grade teachers that we needed in order to make that happen, and then identified 9th grade teachers that would move. When we proposed grade alignment, there was probably 4, 5, 6 different options that we proposed, but the model that was approved by the board is what, the model is a 6th grade 2-person team, and at the time was 7th grade and 8th grade, and we actually didn't promote it in terms of the number of teams. We promoted it in what the day looked like. So for elementary students, that was the conversation wrapped around how many teachers and what their elective options look like. So they had basically 4 elective options, 2 per day, A day and B day, and then they had what we call a wheel, which was new to them. And the wheel was an opportunity to get family consumer ed, tech ed, where in the world, which was the world language, and business ed. Is that correct? Correct, Lance? Okay. So that was new. 6th graders in the elementary school didn't get that. They still, that by law, needed to get art, music, and physical education. they had to have that, it had to be options. So that was the 6th grade schedule. The 7th and 8th grade schedule had 3 elective periods in it. And those 3 elective periods then provided the teachers an opportunity to have these collaborative professional learning teams, so it was time off. The model that we had at the time had enrollments, close to 650 in 650, 700 maybe at Washington, and then 550-ish at Wilson. Actually, I think Washington had about 100 more kids in 2018. And then as we saw the enrollment move forward, 2019 was the first year that Wilson had less than an 8-person team at 7th grade. And they did that because their enrollment didn't constitute for enough kids. They had 156 kids, I think they had in their first year in the 2nd year. And so the model then needed to change, and that's where it went from a 4-person team to a 2-person team. And I want to say that was in the fall of 2019. Then the fall in 2020, that process moved forward again, and the number of 6th grade teachers flexed a bit, but in both 7th grade at Washington, again, they had Wilson, they had less than 4-person teams. They had less kids, so again, they had 6 teachers in that model. So fast forward then to 2021-22, and we've been working through a process that's showing our declining enrollment. We continue to have a need to have, or our enrollment shows a need to have less than 8-person teams. And so that's where we made the recommendation in 2020 to talk about this dual licensure and provide feedback so that teachers could get dual license and we could keep the people who we had and have 6-person teams or 2-person teams in the grade level moving forward. So I think the document that Joyce showed shows some of the enrollment that we have. And as we look at our enrollment from the current elementary schools projecting forward, we also see a likelihood we see a need to continue to have less than 8-person teams. So the model then is to have those 2-person teams because we don't have enough student enrollment, I guess. We don't have enough student enrollment to have 8-person teams. So that's the impetus of why we moved from 4-person teams in grades 7 and 8 to 2-person teams and recommendation in grades 7 and 8. I think that's the background.
Just for clarification, so when you mean the 2-person team, are you saying for that grade level? Explain the difference.
Sure. So a 2-person team means that a teacher teaches 2 core subjects. And we pair math and science with social studies and language arts. So if you and I are a 2-person team, we have somewhere between 40 and 50 kids. You teach science and math, I teach social studies and language arts. We collaborate during the time our kids are at gym, Phi-Ed, Tech Ed, whatever they're choosing. That's our collaboration time. They have that 3 times per day. 2 of those times, one time we talk, one time you have prep to do what you need to do to prepare, and one time we do some enrichment or we need to pull kids in to do things, okay? The 4-person team means that I'm teaching one subject, so maybe I'm science, you're math, Jason is social studies, and Tony's English, okay? And we have between 90 and 100 kids, and they move from person to person, just have more. That model was when we had, 200 kids per grade, that was the model we use, and as we dropped to 150, 160, 140, we reduced it because the class sizes and because of economics, I guess I would But that's the difference basically between a two-person team. And in the, you know, to give you some background, historically, when we were in the junior high model, a 7, 8, 9 model, most of our teachers had a licensure that only allowed them to teach one subject. So they just taught math, they just taught science, or just taught social studies. When we moved the 6th grade teachers, they all had elementary licensure. They're already teaching in the elementary schools, and when we hired them, that happens. Some of our 7th and 8th grade teachers had 1-8 licensure, so they can teach. So back up and say, because you have a 1-8 licensure, you can teach 4 subjects. When you're in 7-12 licensure, you can only teach 1 subject. And so, you know, some of the feedback that the board was working through from staff members is, I have a 7-12 license, I can only teach 1 subject. I don't want to teach a second subject. And what happens is, in order to have a 2-person team, I have to teach 2 subjects. The 4-person team allows you to teach 1 subject, but the change, and the opposite of the change was because we went from 210 to 225 kids to 150 in some cases, and we needed to reduce the total number of staff that we had for economy of scale.
And that's why you have teachers traveling from Wilson to Washington.
Usually the teachers traveling from Wilson to Washington are elective teachers,
Okay.
not core teachers.
That's an option though?
Could a teacher go from Wilson to Washington and teach math? Not efficiently in our subject matter because of the timing that would require them to go. But I mean, they generally just, we don't have any core teachers who travel, core math, science, social studies, language arts, who travel from Wilson to Washington or Wilson or Washington to Lincoln.
Okay.
We do have some other staff who do that, but not our math, science, social studies, and language arts.
Okay. Thank you.
So if I can just add, so being at, when I was on the curriculum committee, so the idea was then that our teachers that have a 7-12, we would ask them if they would like to get a second license in that complementary course, and it was proposed as optional. What happened is the board then heard from, I think, at least 8 teachers, that they felt very passionate about their subject matter and that they didn't want to go teach, or they didn't want to get a license in science if they were a math teacher or social studies English. And we even offered to, one of the things that went through was we had a plan of how we would help subsidize the cost of them doing that. So if they chose to, those that wanted to do it, you know, we would help pay for that. So, which is great. The problem that came was, as it was rolled out as this is kind of the way we're going toward the future, is we had some of our really good teachers already jump ship because they were afraid that they were going to be forced into having to do this, and if they didn't, that they were going to lose their job, even though it was voluntary. And so fast forward to, we have a situation right now that if there is not an opening at the high school for this middle school teacher, they will either have to get this license, which they don't want to do, or they have to leave. And the other thing was, this was kind of discussed and talked about for a few years, and another objection was had we known that this was really going to happen, that when one of those positions opened at the high school, we would take it. But now we're in a situation where there's not a position at the high school. There might be by August or whatever. So now we have this tumultuous situation. And so I think what needs to happen as far as curriculum first and then moving on to the board is once and for all, I think the district needs to decide with what you've heard, and, you know, we have our professionals here that have talked about the pros of this situation, and there is a financial component to it as well. But we need this committee to decide once and for all, are we gonna go with this model? Or are we not? And
Is that open for discussion right now?
Yeah.
Just one correction, that this is the first time this has been discussed at the curriculum committee. You said curriculum committee?
okay, was it
I think you meant
personnel?
personnel.
Okay, thank you guys, personnel.
So, a lot of information, so I understand the need of the plan to consolidate our teachers to provide for the staffing for the students. However, in the dire times that we're in right now with staffing completely, of people wanting to work, period, I would want to move forward in providing job security to the teachers that we already are employed to right now. So that would be the perspective that I'm coming from right now. And I understand the financial situation that that's putting us in. However, I believe qualified teachers that are existing are the utmost importance for us moving forward. And I think we can find a way that we can make them productive and help our students that need it, instead of deterring them from leaving our district because of security issues. That's how I feel.
Just this morning, I had an opportunity to talk to an individual, actually it was pertaining to the interim superintendent, which by the way, he said no. But he is an outstanding individual who actually worked here in the 80s, left in 1989, very well loved by many people. I think maybe even Gigi knows him, I'm not sure. But he now teaches at the Turbo and teaches to aspiring superintendents. So he's very knowledgeable about education in general, right? It's his passion. And I did not prompt this whatsoever. We weren't talking about two-person teams, but the thing that came out of his mouth this morning, which I just totally migrated to, was he said, there are two key factors with the education of our kids and being successful, and that's with our teachers having expertise and passion. And that's what I fear losing by those teachers who have been here for an extremely long period of time, devoted themselves to the kids and have that expertise and have a passion for their subject area, rather than basically forcing them, volunteering to have them go to another area that they've never really even considered before. We have had some teachers who have agreed to do that, and that's great. If they want to do that, that's super. But from my standpoint, I don't fully understand why, one, we haven't looked into more options. This has been rolling forward, and as a board for a year now, we've been saying, you know, we're not really comfortable with this. We don't really like this, and we haven't taken any action on it. So it just keeps rolling instead of someone putting a stop to it and offering other options. I understand it makes scheduling easier, but being easier isn't what's best for our kids. Yeah.
Thank you very much. So to point out, which is probably being done already, but we could post a half position or something, obviously, for if we have a subject that we're losing because of it. And what I'm saying is we could post a position for, if we need a math teacher that year because of enrollment, we still need to fill that, you know, we can post that as a below one, you know, a full-time position if we had to fill a class. So that's an option. I know it's not the viable option that we would like, but I do not want to discourage existing teachers that have been here through the thick and thin, that we're going to be pushing them out because they're not getting dual certified. So I understand both sides of it completely. I just think that our community needs to hold on to what we have of existing experience, because the turnover rate is very, 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 very high.
And that's part of the things to take into consideration too, is if we look at this in the long term, I mean, you guys have provided some information to us going out to 2025. By that time, there will be teachers retiring who are in those positions. right? And then that's when we're bringing in those new positions that maybe are dual certified, so that there can be like a transition time that we see moving forward. But to blatantly say that starting this fall, we're going to all two-person teams and like leaving some of those teachers that have given so much to our students and our community out in the cold, I think it's the wrong thing to do for our kids and for those teachers. And I know I'm being really blunt about it, but that is how I feel.
The challenge will be how we financially are going to make up for the difference in having to, have a full staff teacher that only teaches, one subject.
That's true.
So we're gonna have to, if we send a message as a board that we're gonna support the existing teachers, however, we're gonna have to be creative in how we're gonna solve these future problems of the staffing. At least we're being forthright to try to say, we want you to stay, but we're gonna need some more solutions and maybe changes to take care of our needs for enrollment as we are going down enrollment, if we continue to go down.
I think having more options is part of the key. What other solutions are there?
Yeah. I see both sides, certainly there's the economics of it, right? And we have to be cognizant of that. But, just looking at the situation, this is really, is there more than one teacher in the situation? Or
This year there was that.
Okay.
So.
Well, they're all in that, but the one teacher's in the situation where that person does not have an opening up at Lincoln at this time. So that person, the one person, would have to either go with dual licensure that that person does not want to do, or to essentially leave or retire.
And the other,
Can I just add something?
I just want to say one other thing though.
That's not completely accurate.
There were, if I'm remembering correctly, and somebody correct me if I'm wrong, but when this all started, I believe there were about 15 teachers that this was going to affect in the future. Doesn't mean it was going to be this year, but could be next year. But it was 15 teachers that had this single licensure. Some of them have already left. So, but there's only one person that's affected for next year. Go ahead, Joyce.
Just, really just being respectful, so, just want to clarify or make sure that the correct information is being shared. The one individual this year who is who's impacted and choosing not to get a license, is his choice. At our last personnel committee meeting, it was a week and a half ago, he did come out of that meeting with a plan. And the plan was, because in that building, the enrollment for 7th grade next year would justify 6 teachers. So the plan was, if something doesn't open up at Lincoln High School for this one person between now, into the summer, that for this coming year, we were not, as you said, Kathy, we're not requiring him to get a license, and we're not booting him out. We will go with a 2-person team and a 4-person team. And this teacher would be on the 4-person team, where he only has to teach the one subject. So there is a plan, and that's what we walked out of the personnel committee meeting, and it was just last week, that the one person that's impacted for this coming school year, because the numbers justify 6 teachers. So we agreed that instead of 2-person teams, we would keep a 4 and a 2, so that he could be on the 4-person team and only have to teach one subject, unless something opens up at the high school, and then he would move to the high school. And we would continue to do that, for some of our 8th grade teachers who currently now just have 1 license. and choose, there are definitely some, there are some that already have chosen and gotten that second license. There's some that are working on it right now, and then there's a handful that are choosing not to, and we will continue to move those people to the high school without having to apply, without having to interview. They will be moved to the high school, as we can move them and positions open up. So just want to clarify and make sure we have accurate information about there is a plan for that one individual so that he doesn't have to teach 2 subjects or get a license this coming year.
For 1 year.
Right.
And
That's what I was gonna
that's
say.
part of what I'm trying to do is say,
Something will
we need
likely
to
go
address
down.
this, so are we going with 2-person houses or aren't we? Like, this has been going on for an
I
entire
don't
year.
disagree, Ken. I want it to be resolved too. We
Okay,
have a
but
plan for this
that's why we're
coming
here.
year. So,
Thank you, first, thank you for the information, because that does help us understand that we are moving forward with a plan, even though maybe the idea of the 2-person and the 4-person was somebody felt that it was being bullied, that we have to go this way, and then it was pushing people out. And what we need to do as a board, as a district, we need to unite, say, hey, we're gonna support our teachers no matter if we're gonna go we're gonna stay with what we're doing, so that sends the message saying, we're not gonna try to push you out the door, and we will make, solutions to the problem, which we already are, which you're defending, which thank you. But I'm saying, as a board, we need to be transparent and clear to our staff that that's the direction we're moving. That's what you're asking for, and, because I think we're doing it, but we're not being transparent to our teachers, our staff.
Well, but the other thing that's gonna happen is, let's fast forward. So the idea is, in the future,
Yep.
we would move to the 2-person team model.
Mhm.
But to do that, we have to plan.
Mhm.
And so, and correct me if I'm wrong, but Washington is going to run into this next year, correct?
when you say next year, 22.
I'm talking about, no,
September?
I'm talking about 23, 24 school year.
Yes, Wilson and Washington, potentially, based on enrollment, in 23, 24, potentially, unless the numbers change significantly, the numbers for 8th grade would align with 6 teachers.
So the reason
now
why,
we
the reason why this is important to make a decision is because we're gonna keep running into this where our teachers that are there doing this one license, it's always gonna come down to, if we don't have a position for you, because we can't, I mean, it was very difficult at I think it was personnel, that we had an administrative here, and he's all ready to go, right? He's got the schedule, he's got everything ready. And now we're saying, oh, we're doing something different, or we don't know if we want that. So I think it's super important that this decision is made, or there's some sort of compromise or communication, I don't really know, but otherwise we're gonna keep running into this.
Have we ever had issues in the past where the student population has gone down and gone back up, and how could that change this conversation?
We've done that in elementary and high schools all the time. Happens every in our specialists, happens all the time. Happens in 6th grade. But the issue in 7th and 8th grade is that there's a licensure piece to that. And some of it stems back from our junior high model when we had 7-12 licensure. So it's a little bit unique. So elementary had all licensures, but we have 3 grades in Jackson in grade 5 one year and 2 grades the next year. Somebody has to move, that happens. We have 12 math teachers at Lincoln, and next year we have 11 or 13, that happens. But because they're all licensed to sing, there really isn't the stress, right? And so right now, the stress is coming from literally just 7th and 8th grade core teachers. I don't mean just, but that's where it comes from. 7th and 8th grade core, and it's because of the licensure. Because there's this licensure that gives the district flexibility, and licensure that not all the teachers have. And so you're gonna see flex. I'm doubtful, based on what I see in our 4K, 5K, that we're gonna see 600 kid classes at Wilson and Washington. That's not gonna happen. We're probably leaning towards 450 than 600. So I don't suspect, based on what we trend right now, that we're gonna see 8-person teams at the middle school.
When I look at the information that you provided for us though, and we're talking about, so, for example, of course, this isn't Wilson, I better go down to Wilson. If you look at the 7th grade for this coming year, 22-23, you have 150 students in 7th grade versus 163 in 8th. So you're saying we're okay with 4-person teams for 163 students, but in 7th grade, we only have 13 left, and you want to go down to 2-person teams.
No, there's 6 in both.
No, for next, when we went through staffing this spring, across the whole district, there were a couple of instances, both at the elementary and the middle school, and I'm talking core teachers now, not your electives,
Right.
core teachers. There were a few situations at elementary and possibly the middle school where we could have reduced classroom teachers based on enrollment. And we made a decision this spring for next year, because we all know it's been a challenging year on many layers, many lenses. We made a decision that from this year to 22-23, we were not going to reduce classroom teachers. The critical pieces, we know it's been a challenging year this year. I said there were probably 2, maybe 3 elementary spots that we could have reduced a teacher classroom. We chose not to. And we had that discussion for the middle school as well, because you're right, when you look at, and again, Washington is a good example for 22-23. We could have said for next year, 8th grade, Washington, we could have gone down to 6 teachers, and we chose not to. That was a conscious decision. Could have probably done the same thing at Wilson in grade 8. Could have gone down to 6 for next year. We kept 8. We chose not to. So that was a conscious decision that we made through staffing, that even though we looked just at enrollment, we very likely could have reduced the number of 8th grade teachers, core teachers, at Wilson and Washington for this coming year. And we consciously made a decision not to do that.
Because we know it's what's best for students. Right?
Well, we felt
For
like this
learning.
was not the time,
Right.
be it at elementary, we could have reduced at elementary, and we had 3 spots in 3 different, because of enrollment, and we made a conscious decision. We did not want to reduce core teachers for next year. Now, the other thing,
I'm not the chair.
or can I, yeah, I think the other thing, I don't disagree. I think we need to resolve this. It was my understanding coming out of personnel last week, we had a plan and a decision was made. And then a day or 2 later, I heard press pause. So I think the other thing, just for the committee and maybe the board to understand, if this, I guess I haven't heard exactly what you're proposing, Kathy, but if the board wants to say that we are going to have 4-person teams in grades 7 and 8, no matter what the enrollment is, I think you have the discretion to do that, but I guess I would ask you to think about kind of the big picture and the implications of that. And I'm not saying it would be great to have those small sizes of class, but there definitely is a budget implication. And we've heard, for next year, we'd have to come up with $340,000, because we need to hire 4 teachers. We need to hire 2 teachers for 7th grade at Wilson and 2 at Washington in 7th grade. We've got to hire 4 teachers that are not budgeted for at the tune of $340,000. I'm not sure where that money's coming from. And if we go to an 8-person team in 7th grade this year at Wilson and Washington, they will have class sizes of like 16, 17, and 18. I guarantee you are going to get calls from elementary teachers like, hey, wait a minute. We've got class sizes in 3rd, 4th, and 5th grade, in the mid-20s and upper 20s. In 3rd and 4th and 5th grade. And now in 7th and 8th grade, we've got class sizes of 17 and 18. You're also going to hear from the elementary teachers that at the elementary level, they have significantly less prep time than our middle school core teachers. Significantly less prep time than our middle school core teachers. And our elementary teachers are teaching 4 subjects. They have 4 subjects to prep for compared to the middle school. So I want you to see the big picture, that if you decide to go with 4-person teams in 7th grade next year, I'm not saying it's a bad thing. You're going to have very small class sizes, and again, we have to hire 4 teachers. But I think you got to understand the implications. So again, I would be surprised if you would not hear from many elementary classroom teachers like, hey, wait a minute. Then I think the other thing you just have to think about is, if this board wants to hire 4 teachers and spend $340,000, is that the place we want to spend our money and add 4 teachers? We got a lot of needs in this district in a lot of different areas. So I would also ask the board, if we're going to hire 4 teachers for next year, 2 in 7th grade at Wilson, 2 at Washington, at the tune of $350,000, is that where maybe it is, but I think you have to ask yourself that question. Is that where our greatest need is across this whole district if you're going to add 4 teachers?
Right. I'm going to respond to that right now. First of all, when we look at numbers, a lot of them can be looked at differently. It depends on your perspective. So when you're saying 2 first of all, you said hiring 2 people at Washington. You're not going with 2-person teams at Washington. You already said that for this next year. So it gives us another year. It would not be 4 individuals. It would be 2. It would be at Wilson. When I compare the chart that you have given us, Joyce, when you look at the 8th grade in 22-23 with Washington, they're going with 8 teachers. So that means they have 2 4-person teams. They have 156 students.
Right.
We're talking about making changes at Wilson to 6 individuals, so a 4 and 2-person team, because we have 6 kids left in 7th grade. It's 150. And there's not a wrong thing with having some small class sizes. In the midst of having all the behavior issues that we have and the learning that's been going on and the need for higher level learning, having some classes, especially at the middle school level, which we have attested to with behavior issues alone, and the numbers. Mark just said that to Tony. Where's our biggest issues? 6 to 10. Middle school is undoubtedly one of the most tumultuous times for students in their lives. Whether it's COVID or anything, it's just a natural time in their lives to be dealing with all kinds of issues. So in order to have smaller class sizes at 1 grade level for a year so that we can further address this, maybe people will retire, maybe we hire in some new teachers who are multi-licensed, it buys some time. I don't think that that's a bad thing. I see it as greater learning, more control in the classroom, and ultimately it's better for our kids. That's really what it boils down to. It's the kids.
Again, we walked out of personnel committee, it was last week, with a plan for this coming year. So what are you proposing, Kathy?
I don't have a proposal. I think that's part of the issue, is that Joyce, for a year now, we've been having these discussions about two-person teams. But every single time the board, and you can tell I'm getting really emotional about it. First of all, I'm tired of this conversation. Every time as a board, we have come back multiple times and said, we're not comfortable with this. What about a grandfather clause? We've come up with different things. And instead of someone stopping and creating other issues as far as coming from administration, the ball just kept rolling on down the street because you had two-person teams in your site, and that's just where it kept going. Nobody came up with another option. We've never been shown this until during this meeting. It's bothersome to me, and I feel like we need to put a stop to the idea so that we don't have teachers leaving. Granted, we have one person right now who it really affects, but that's not entirely true. There's a number of people that we've all been reached out to. I have just in the last couple of weeks who are scared to death and considering retiring or leaving because they don't feel like they have any other options and they're being essentially shoved away. So it's part of why this needs to, it's just got to stop at some point. Why can't we take this year, look at it differently, come up with some other options?
But that's part of my question. So I think I already at least tried to explain why we are, through our staffing process, you asked it again, through our staffing process, we made a conscious decision to stay with 8, even though they only have 8 more kids, whatever the number is, we made a conscious decision to do that. We decided we were not going to reduce the overall total number of core teachers, elementary or middle school. So, and again, I'll go back to last week. We came out of personnel with a plan for next year, and it really just impacts Wilson. And we had a plan.
I think
to
Joyce,
stay with the forward
I think the issue is that I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, but we're okay with everything staying 4 and 2 for next year.
Okay.
I think the difficulty is that we're already hearing rumblings of us talking about now Washington in a year or two. And we don't want to go down that road and be right where we are today. So that's why we want to, in my opinion, make a very clear message to our administration that we do not want these teachers being told that they either get this dual license or they're gone. And that's what has been either verbally communicated or unverbally communicated. It's happened, and we've lost people already that have been here that were great teachers because of it. So what I'm at least saying is that we realize that Washington is going to have to do this. We do not want the administration to start having our teachers be told that they have to get this license or they may not have a position next year. And I'm not talking about fall of 20, I'm talking about progression. So it only made sense to, and maybe it's not that we're not going to go with 2-person teams. Maybe it's that every year we relook at this and say, what is the best model? I think that might be, but I think the other piece was, it has never been presented to us either that this is the best academic model, 2-person teams for a middle school, for 7th and 8th. No one has ever brought any data that says, you know what, these are the pros, these are the cons. And so again, I realize that it was done differently, but that's just another.
Can I just, and I've said this many times through the last year that we've been talking about it, whether it's, I don't believe it was verbally said this way, but perception is reality, right? So however it was perceived, but it has never been the intent intentional.
It may not be, but we're in that situation right now.
But I'm just saying the intent of administration, you know, for teachers to feel like we're trying to get rid of any teachers, that has never been the intent.
I don't
But
think-
again, you know, whether they perceive it that way
I
or
don't
not.
think that that's how they
I don't know.
perceive it. It's not even a perception. It's, we don't have a spot for you because you have to be dual licensed. Sorry that you've been here X amount of years, over 25. Sorry we didn't tell you 2 years ago when there was a spot at Lincoln for you. So either get this or bye. Is that not exactly what, maybe not those words, but is that not what we're up against right now?
I think it's also really saying that, you know, if those teachers really wanted to be at Lincoln when there were positions open for them 2 years ago, that's something they would have applied for. But obviously those same teachers though choose to stay in middle school. And, you know, I would think that every single person who's involved in education understands what an unusual animal middle school is. And that it takes a teacher with real passion to stick with that group of individuals for a long time. It's not an easy group of people to be with, but some of us just love it. And so why force those people out of those positions? You know, there's so many facets to this. I mean, we could argue about each little thing, but what really it boils down to is what's best for kids. And to honoring those positions of teachers who've been here for a long time, who have served us, who have served us well, and that they're not afraid of their job security or want to go somewhere else because they have lives here, they love the kids, you know, there's all those reasons. So it could all be listed, and I think part of the issue that we've been trying to say, this does not make us comfortable without coming and voting on something, but there haven't been any options other than from administration in general, like, you know, but like, no other options. There's just no, this is why, other than the numbers, you know. I feel like the burden of this rests on the teachers.
And what the other one has been, so they can go to their PLC.
Yeah.
Because the PLC is what is going to make the kids better learners, not the fact that they would have a teacher that specializes in that content area. That's the other.
Yeah, and then the other thing is like what Matthew brought up, like, you know, why can't we be looking at
Partial.
Yeah, partial or some teachers, some
Retirees.
core teachers who are willing to float between Washington and Wilson. I know it may be a scheduling thing, but
Obviously, but
yeah,
we're in dire times at this point, and
yeah, we need to come up with solutions.
I think many of us understand that, but historically, teachers don't like to travel, right?
Yep.
So now, I mean, and I don't even know if it's, and I think there has been options talked about. We talked about, if I'm the math teacher, can I teach grades 7 and 8? Well, you can, but it doesn't work. It doesn't align with this, you know, chapter. I don't even know what it would look like. But we've talked about, if I can do math, can I do 7 and 8? It could, but it doesn't work. I don't know if it would work to have traveling teachers, but guarantee you then you're going to have teachers that are not going to be happy about traveling. Traveling teachers typically don't like to travel. They like to be in one building.
Joyce, I just, you know, I think what I heard was the board wants is okay, I think, with the 2 and 4 at Wilson for next year. And that the principals and the teams could maybe come to the curriculum committee and express their thoughts about the 2-person team and give the curriculum committee some feedback and information in regards to why they value the 2-person team, and answer some questions, knowing that the board is looking for some other alternatives, probably by November, so that we have a plan for the next school year. So we're not sitting here in May trying to figure out, do we have a place for somebody or not?
Yeah.
So, I mean, we do have what I would call a reduction in force policy. We do have a policy that could bump people to keep people whole, right? And we're in all cases also trying to avoid that, because that moves somebody to someplace where they maybe don't want to be, move somebody else to somebody where they don't want to be, but it keeps everybody whole, if that makes sense. And we could explore half-time positions that might be available and look at that. But I don't believe that we're in a position right now, based on, you know, what it was last week, having Corey sit here and he's saying, hey, I gotta have a plan like now, so that we know going into the school year, because I gotta put kids in classes, I think is what I heard him say. And so I think what I heard the finance or the committee say was, we'll hold on as long as we can. I don't know how long that would be until if something opens, because the individual said that he would be willing to go to Lincoln. So it's not I don't want to, I'm willing to. If something opens up, we do that and go back to a 2-person team when we hire somebody new. But long-term, we need to bring the middle school principals in and their team so that they can share with the curriculum committee their passion about why they believe this is the case. And if the curriculum committee says, we don't agree with that, you're gonna give them the feedback, and then they're gonna have from, you know, September, October, November, December to come up with a new plan that the board could approve. Does that sound like a middle ground place where we are here at 7:25?
I call to question voting on an action to have 4-person teams tonight. That's what I would say to that point, because I don't want to just sit and do nothing anymore. I want to send a message to our staff saying that we're going to have a job for them. And I understand the implications of that. That's where I'm at.
So you want to take it to action and vote?
Yes, I'm willing to move forward with that.
Okay.
That's what I'm saying.
It does have to go to the greater board. We're not making a final decision here, so it would be part of the message.
You need a second one.
Yes,
Can I just, excuse me, can I clarify what you said? Are you saying 4-person, are you talking 8 teachers then in 7th grade next year at Wilson and Washington?
I'm saying that we can have 4-person teams at the middle schools, from what I'm understanding, instead of reducing it down to 2-person teams. That's what I'm saying.
So for next year, for 22, 23, nothing would change. Meaning that right now it's a 4 and a 2, right, at Wilson? It would stay at a 4 and a 2.
Yes.
What we're talking about is after that, what's gonna happen?
And I'm saying that I'm okay with moving forward, saying that we will be sticking to the 4 and the 2 as it is needed. Maybe I can revise it or amend it, but we wouldn't be voting on the action. We wouldn't be voting on it until it goes to the board level, full board. But I'm saying that to stay where we're at with our teaching, our teaching, what do you call it, pairs model, 4 to teacher pairs instead of 2 teacher pairs, depending on the situation. That's what I'm trying to say. If anybody can help me.
So we have 6 right now at Wilson, so we have 6 at Wilson now, and there's a proposal for 6 next year.
Okay.
So just to clarify, one option is, I think we've talked about, is to keep it 4 and 2, quote unquote, unless a teacher has an opportunity to move to Lincoln High School, there's one. And I believe Washington also, I'm looking at Lance, has a 6-person team prepared for next year, but currently they don't have 6, is that correct? This year you have 7 or 8?
8.
Yes. Okay, so if we keep status quo, we would have 8 and 6. I just want to make sure,
Yeah, okay.
which is a little bit different.
Yep.
And if we choose to add, then we would have 8 and 8. That would add staff. We stay the status quo, or what's currently in the budget or planning, it would be 6 and 6. There is a individual at Wilson who needs to be in the 4 and 2. He would be in the 4. I don't want to confuse you, but I just want to make sure I'm
But at the
clear.
same time, you're clarifying that you're saying we can stay at what we're doing now for the next school year because of the situation we're trying to figure out. We figured it out. I guess what I'm trying to say is I would like to keep the availability to stay higher ratios, which I know we're gonna have to manipulate how we provide the needs for those subjects, but the administration of that school can provide a solution. Not, I would want to be on the decision-making saying that I'm giving the administrator the ability to fluctuate at that school. That's what I'm saying.
Right. So just to clarify, if in fact you want to go 8 and 8, we've got to add 2 staff. That was what Joyce provided at each building.
And just so I understand, we could move forward with the plan that, the 4 and 2 plan, that's without incurring that extra cost, and the teacher in question would still be able to keep, stick with the one subject.
Yes. For yes,
So
in theory, it pushes it down the road, because next year we have 6-ish folks who are in that role at Wilson, Washington.
Right.
But it solved that 7:30 on a Thursday night.
Well, I don't see why we wouldn't do that and avoid a $340,000 overrun. I mean, that's just my thought, especially if we could keep the teacher, the one that's concerned about it. But I do agree that we need to figure out a longer term solution. I'm just reluctant to commit to something like that we haven't budgeted for.
I think in the meantime, though, when you were saying before, Mark, that we need to have our principals, Lance and Corey, come to us with other options by like November, so we can have this discussion now about what's moving forward and not waiting until, that's part of my, for lack of a better term, beef, because here we are at the 11th hour, we've been having these discussions, and some of the stuff should have happened before, because it's been kind of controversial all year long. And we should be done and over with by then. Like Lance and Corey, they should have been able to do their thing by this point, no one even be in question.
And it did go into personnel, and they got into mud a little bit, and now it's back here. But I guess I would just say this, I would, and again, I'm the short time here, but I would give the building principals and their team a chance to explain why they believe in this model. And if then that doesn't convince the committee that that's the route we should go, then they will have at least some marching orders to go back and come up with a new plan that they would then bring back.
Okay.
Because I don't think everybody's heard from, at this committee, right, has heard from why they believe that this is the model that should move forward.
Yeah.
Right, so I think that would be helpful.
Yeah, I agree. Quick question, this, just kind of moving towards recruiting teachers with 2 licenses, which it sounds like is the new normal, right, kind of what we're doing going forward. Does that impact recruiting? Is that harder?
Easier. It's easier to find 1-8 licensure than 7-12.
DPI changed the licensing through the years.
Yeah.
So it's like you and I had that discussion, like it used to be different where you would specialize.
Well, 1-8 is elementary. So
Right.
so again, to give you some, I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
The junior high model almost required you to have a 7-12 licensure because you had 7, 8, 9.
Right.
And so a lot of people, then you would be, so the district got 7-12 licensures because they wanted the flexibility, because a 9th grade student couldn't be taught by a 1-8 licensed person.
Gotcha.
Okay? So fast forward to the middle school model, and it's a 6-8. I can cover everything. I can cover art, technically, I cover art and music and Phi Ed in grade 6. That's, in all honesty, they can do that. We don't ask our teachers to do that, but they could. There would be a ruckus there, but in the grades 7 and 8, I can teach all those subjects. There's more elementary licensed people because there's more people in 1-8 than there is in 7-12. That makes sense? There's 5 grades instead of 7. So there's more people. Therefore, it's easier to recruit. Doesn't mean that you can't. It's just easier because I'm just looking for, this is how I tell you, I'm just looking for a 1-8 licensed teacher as opposed to I'm looking for a 7-12 English teacher. I'm looking for a 7-12 math teacher. I'm looking for a 7-12 social studies or science. I'm only looking for that 104 genre as opposed to I'm just looking for an elementary licensed person. It's a little different.
So it's compounded 2 times because of enrollment going down, and then we switched from a junior high model to a middle school model.
Yes.
So it's compounded 2 times. and now we have overstaffing.
So how many teachers is this gonna impact, I guess, down the line? Because as,
16, right now it's 16. There's 8
yeah,
and 8 in Wilson. In theory, if there was, it started with 8 and 8. 8 in grade 7 and 8 in grade 8. And then at Washington, 8 in grade 7, 8 in grade 8 in 2019. Now, as we are moving forward, we're looking at 6 in grade 7 and 8, so that's 14, and 6 and 8. So we're talking about now, I see the math person here, right? So 14 and 14 is 28. So we went from 32 to 28. Right. So most of our teachers have a 1-8 license or a dual license. There's probably now, I would guess, probably 6 or 8 that are in that single licensure piece. Most of those are in grade 8 in Wilson or Washington. One of those is in grade 7 at Wilson.
And they're experienced teachers that got their certification from the DPI way before they started doing the.
Some of them are. Some of them are 5-year people.
right, so there's about 8 of them, did I hear that right?
I think there's more than that.
Not
I can name like 5 or 6
No.
on my hand, just at Wilson.
right, but there isn't as many more at Washington. So I think the numbers. I think what is it, Joyce? She's looking at.
Are you talking how many don't, how many have?
How many are single license?
Yeah, and I guess that don't wanna get that second one, right?
Well, that
Oh, that's
don't
different.
want- that's
Yeah, that's
different.
different.
That's different.
Just single license, because there are some that are already doing it.
Right, because I mean, I think the issue at hand is
We have 10 between the 2 8th grades. Between Wilson and Washington, there are currently 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. There are 10 that have a single license. Now, some of those are willing to get the second license with the financial support that the board approved back in February or March. There's a couple 8th grade teachers that have a single license that we hired in the last year, that upon hire, they are hired with the understanding. We try as best as possible, we have for the last 3 years since we went through middle school. We've tried very hard just to hire 1-8. The pool of candidates is getting smaller and smaller, so there have been a few times where we've hired what we thought was the best candidate, and they had a single license, but upon hire, had the conversation that eventually, and if we move toward teams of 2, you'll need to get a, so there are people in this mix that have been hired in the last year that also understand and agree to get a second license. But if you want to know just raw numbers, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 4, 6, 7, 8, 9, there's currently 10 8th grade teachers who have a single license.
Yeah, it sounds like there's really only a handful that aren't willing to get that second license, right? So that's really the problem we're trying to solve, is how do we treat them fairly and give them, right? And just knowing that we're moving to this 2-district model. So I think really what we should be doing is, or asking our staff to do, is come up with a plan to transition them into the high school in the next couple of years, right? Because it sounds like that's really.
And that's absolutely an option that we talked about when Mark and I met with them. So
100%. I mean, you're right on the money. 100% agree. Here is, I think, though, we still need to have a plan with board support, because it's possible that somebody doesn't leave at the high school at the area that they're certified, right? And then we're going to be right back to the same spot again, and we don't want to be here. I mean, we want to do what's best. I 100% agree that, but there's turnover. But let's say there's turnover for only 6. Then I've got, 4 whom, we're either spending $360,000 hiring part-time teachers, creating a different travel schedule. I think, and again, there is lots of pieces to that, but I guess I would just say, I go back to that piece. I would encourage the board to give the middle school folks a chance to give their spiel to the curriculum committee. And if the committee doesn't approve that, doesn't love it, give them the marching orders to go back and come up with another model. They'll bring that back to the board. Here's what it looks like. And they'll have in their back of their mind what they have to do, which is try to figure out how we're going to move forward with these 4, 6, individuals who do prefer not to, I think is the word I use.
What's the likelihood that in the next 2 years that there wouldn't be 4 or 6 or how many positions open? I mean,
So this is what I would tell you. I'm surprised we don't have any openings in social studies, because that's pretty typical, and we don't have any openings in social studies. So I don't know. I mean, the likelihood is we almost always have some openings in social studies. We don't have any this year. So, you know, I don't, it just depends.
Would it be possible to get details on, I guess, all the teachers that would, when I say details, just the number and like the positions?
Yep, absolutely.
Are they all social studies, or, you know, what's the breakdown look like, just to better understand the problems? It sounds like it's really manageable. I mean, I guess without knowing all the weeds,
Yes.
we just gotta develop a plan to get them.
It's manageable. But again, I think there's a balance between, I think what, I don't know, say this generally, what management wants and what the individual wants. And so we have to kind of work.
I know,
work
but
through that.
now you lost me, because I know you think we're doing this just for one teacher.
No, I understand. I don't want to make one teacher. I'm just saying that there's a balance there. If we don't have a plan moving
Oh,
forward,
absolutely.
that we're going to, then I don't want to make a decision based on one person, right? We want to.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
But what I'm saying, and that's where you're coming from, at some point, we're gonna have to decide. There's some academic pieces, there's some social emotional pieces, and there's some financial pieces. And there's gonna be a balance between what all of those pieces and what we value, what you as a board value.
Yeah, so it sounds like we have time, we don't have to decide tonight. I'd like to hear some ideas from the administrators that this is gonna impact and hear their plans, but I think we should ask them to develop better plans and, frankly, give you some time to wrap my head around this, because it's kind of a complex issue. But the good news is that we don't have to decide on that $340,000 tonight, right? We can still operate with the status quo next
Right,
year.
what
We
came out
gotta-
of personnel is we're just gonna, for 2022, 23, we're keeping things the same.
Okay.
We're not doing,
Yeah, I just want to clarify that the employee, I mean, the staff that we hired, I want to stick with them throughout the hire, so I know that's a bumpy road. At the same time, we understand that we have to adjust, so through attrition, hopefully, but we have to send a message through the board that we still support our staff that's existing. So that's where I think the contradiction was sent, that we have to move away from something because of staffing issues. So we're gonna do it slowly, but maybe we're gonna be a little more transparent with the staff now saying that, you know, we're gonna continue down this road and we're gonna make it work throughout every school year, you know? That's kind of where, best we can. And we maybe would like some information of different solutions to solve the problem in the next school year, which I just mentioned 3, so.
the only other thing that I would ask the committee, if that's what, we're gonna do, is that, sort of the marching orders would be that we would just, everything would stay the same as it is for 2022, 23. The other reason that we kind of pressed pause on this was because, personnel was adamant about, making sure that any new hire that we had would have something in their contract that would specify that they know that upon hire that they would be expected to get this dual licensure. So when I was signing contract, we had an addendum in there and I just said, let's press pause here, because if that's not going to be something, and I can't remember, were those existing?
Rules?
Are those those were
Those are
existing?
people that were hired, the 4 individuals were hired like last summer.
Okay,
Again, we try hard to hire 1/8.
Yeah.
It's not always possible.
Right.
So there were 4 people hired between Wilson and Washington that had a single license, that upon hire, they communicated, they were agreeable, they knew that moving forward, at some point, they would have to teach 2 subjects, and they would need the license.
Right,
second
so-
license.
right, so now we have this addendum attached, and I just told Joyce to hold off on it until we have this discussion, so, you know, so is it okay to have that addendum on there that says that, within the next year, I think it says, we'd like you to begin the process.
That makes sense.
Yeah, so clarify, is it a renewal or is it a new hire completely outside of our scope of original position?
I believe they were renewals, but the renewal from they're renewals from 2021-22. So we hired them for this school year new, and they are getting their contract now for this upcoming 2022-23 school year. It was discussed with them during hiring process that they would be asked to do this. And so that what we asked was, can we have something in writing that they know that that's an expectation?
Yeah, probably should have that.
Yeah. I think it protects the district.
Oh, yeah.
Well, then we don't run into this, right? It's communicated and that they know that that's going to be an expectation of what they do for the next year. So they would have been in our district now 1 year.
Yeah.
So if it's okay, then we'll have Joyce go ahead and, actually it went out, right? Did the addendum go out? No, it didn't, okay. Yeah, so I would, if it's okay with everybody, we would let Joyce go ahead and attach that addendum that these 2022-23 school year people would know that they should start that process.
Yeah.
And that any new hire that we have that we may have to hire without that licensure, that they know that that is something that they're gonna need to do, so that we can start moving towards that as,
Option.
as an option. So is everyone okay with that?
Thank you. Yep.
Go for it, Joyce.
So, it's okay to go ahead and tell Corey, plan for a 4 and a 2. 'Cause
Yes.
he's got planning to do.
Yep, for 2022-23.
So we do expect them to come back with kind of their argument for it and possibly other options that we would like to discuss in the future, like by November. So that
For
we're not in this-
2023-24.
Right, the following school year, so we're not in this position.
And we'll make sure,
that is-
and we'll make sure we invite them to do that on our committee.
I mean, it's just so frustrating that it's gone on this long, that's part of my frustration. I just, it shouldn't have to be this hard for all of us.
I don't disagree.
Yeah, so the administrator has to kind of try to think of some different ways outside the box to fill the position. Moving forward.
Okay,
Yes,
Jason.
Just for, the minutes purposes here, I am no Lord Braun, so, what I think I just heard was that Wilson for 22-23 will remain as planned with a 4 and 2. Is that at the 8th grade level?
seven.
Thank you. And that, before November, we would be asking our middle school principals to come to a committee, is that the curriculum committee?
Yes.
To the curriculum committee with a why, what, and how 2-person team, and if there's any other solutions, other options.
Options, yeah.
Is that correct?
And if I could just add, I'd like to see that ahead of the meeting if possible, just so I could have some time to digest it, whatever they're gonna be presenting to us.
Yeah, we typically work, if this is a Thursday meeting, we try to do 48 hours prior. So that's our goal. Absolutely. And then we'll talk to you. Thank you.
Okay. I'm trying to sign back in. I think that we are at,
Policy 2240.
oh gee, we have that yet. Okay.
That one shouldn't be too long though. I don't.
Okay, we're at policy 2240. One of the things that we wanted to mention, actually Stacy and I did talk about this too, is that we wanted to bring it to the curriculum committee. Started a short conversation about it, but it is going to be addressed, I believe, on Tuesday. What are you talking about, Stacy?
I think I'm just gonna give, information so the whole board can hear it.
So I think the most important thing at this point is to say it is something we are definitely addressing, and so that our public knows that too. And it is about the opt-out with different programming in our schools, that parents and students have the ability to opt out. So we are looking at that policy, and we will continue to look at that policy and hopefully have that nailed down in the next.
Yeah, so a couple of things. Mark and I talked, and this will be the update I give to the board. Is he's going to find out just kind of a timeline for us of kind of where we might intervene in these situations that come up. Kind of what happened, where we might intervene, and is our policy, because one of the things that Mark had mentioned was part of the thing that may have happened is that our teachers, administration, we may not know about the policy, and where could we have maybe done something different to let parents know. So that's what we're looking at. So, and if our policy doesn't address it, let's button that policy up, because we have one that exists. So we're right now, a couple of things. One, we're waiting for, some information, an update from Mark. Joyce has already contacted Neola and she's going to get the information. Neola will present to us all the different options that can go into this policy. And so we'll be able to look at that. And then I think the other thing is, what Mark and I had talked about, and again, I just want to reiterate at the meeting, is that, because I think the concern is we got to do it now, because what happens in tomorrow or the next day, or if we kick the can down the road. And I think, Mark and I will make sure that, and that's why it's so important to kind of look at what happened, is needing to remind our administration and also our staff of the process or the procedure that it needs to go through. Let's do that right away to make sure that we don't have a situation, like we did. So that's kind of where we're at. We don't even have the information yet to revise the policy, and we don't have the exactly what happened, a real clear timetable to find out where we can do things differently. So, but know that we're not kicking the can down the road. What we are going to do is come up with something that is communicated to administration and staff, so that we know that this needs to be followed until we have a policy change, if there needs to be one. Does that make sense? Yes, Jason.
Thank you. Just for note-taking
Yes.
purposes, we are addressing, or so that to me is that we're taking a look at the policy,
Correct.
and that, I heard Kathy say, I think it is at the bottom here, speaks to the opting out, so that specifically is part of the process to review. And then, it says where, I think Stacy said where we intervene, we need to be clear. I don't know who the we is in that.
I guess as a district, what's the procedure? So, yeah, the
Okay,
process, yeah.
Thank you. And Mark is going to gather some information, and also, I believe this is what I heard, a reminder of those processes when we have one person. And Joyce, I call her JGA, has already contacted Neola to look at those options, and those will be brought forward for consideration. Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, I'll just like to add, as we get into that process, I think it'd be worthwhile considering, instead of having people opt out of that, maybe we consider having people opt into it. It just seems to me like, in light of what Mark mentioned earlier, like some parents may not be as engaged, right? So they may not even get that stuff. So it's just something to think about.
I think that's a great idea.
We'll have to do a real good job of defining it. Right? So if we're talking parents, we get to opt in or opt out of it. They'll have to have a really clear picture of what it is, as well as our teachers and administrators.
Yeah, I guess the policy says controversial issues, right? So I guess, we can dig into the weeds there, but, you know, I just think if it's something like a letter that gets sent home, you know, they got a stack of mail, who knows, maybe they would normally get to it, but they don't. So I guess I just want to make sure that we're not, we're just being really thoughtful about ensuring that they get that communication. If it's something that's that controversial, then, like I said, I'd almost rather have them opt in than risk the possibility of a parent maybe not even getting it.
Yeah, I would totally agree, and I guess I'm hoping that Neola has some options that are more reflective of the current state of the union than 2008.
Right.
Right, so we might have some clarity around that when we get there.
Which
So-
is why we need to start working on that.
And my point again is just, I agree with everything said, we need to be really insanely clear to our stakeholders about what that it is. Right, so, that's my.
Human growth and development is what it says in the policy. Controversial issue. So it's defined already, but yes, I understand what you're saying. But we can move forward with the process. So policy review.
It needs to be done. It's
Thank
been
you.
a long time. All right, so other than that, I think our last agenda item is future meeting dates. You got excited about that,
No,
because it's like the last.
I guess the question is, we have traditionally, systematized curriculum committees, the schedule of, and so we've been working on, third Thursdays at 5 p.m. start time. And so we just want to make sure if that is still a good spot for this team, and if so, then I'll send an invite.
Yeah, one of the things that I talked about though is when you send that invite at the beginning of the year, it gets lost then when you have to, part of that is the virtual stuff. It's hard to find those invites then later. I guess I'd rather go out a couple months and then do more invites for the next 2 months. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, we can work on the logistics of
Yeah,
letting invites go out, but I think the question here is, do we want to work on the third Thursday at 5 p.m., or if not, when's that?
I'm very flexible with time, so.
You know, I'd almost rather have it earlier in the week if that's possible, but that's just me, like, I could, just my schedule for work is kind of hectic, so. It's
You got life?
Believe it or not, I do, yeah.
Yes, wow.
But I just, like, sometimes I travel, that comes up.
Right, pretty much.
Yeah, you know, so I know like Tuesdays are our other meetings, so it's just easier for me to plan travel if I knew like our regular meetings are on Tuesdays instead of maybe what Thursdays or whatever. I mean, I could do it, it just creates more mental hurdles for me that I gotta clear. I'll refer to you guys, so I don't want to inconvenience you guys, I'm just speaking of my own.
I really don't want to do the meetings on Tuesday evenings.
I could probably meet a little bit earlier, but
What about Monday?
I can
Well,
do Tuesday
Wednesday.
during the day, but just not the evening.
In the summer, I think it's a little more flexible, so maybe we can just talk about June for now, and then, have it scheduled month to month for the summer. And then,
Should we do Tuesday nights? I'm fine for a while, so if we're gonna do Tuesday nights, what about you, Matthew?
Yeah, after evenings would be
Preferred, okay. So can we do the third Tuesday for a couple months, and then
third Tuesday
then go
of
from
June,
there?
yeah.
June and July?
June 21st,
Yeah.
5 p.m.
Sure.
And then it would be July 19th. We could get two on the calendar, if that works.
That's okay with you guys?
Our regular, does that interfere with our regular meeting?
No, this is
Oh,
the
it's
second.
our third, so.
Oh.
What if I want to have a special meeting on Tuesday?
We'll watch with you.
We already have it on the calendar, so. I think-
First come, first served.
I think the other thing too, just to consider for this committee is that hopefully next week the board will approve that some of these individuals that don't have to be here every single day in the summer, would do a virtual meeting.
Oh.
So you just be thinking about that.
So
Is
again,
that for like staff you're talking about, or?
But yes,
Yeah, I mean, I don't really care.
yeah, that they can work from home rather than driving here at 5 o'clock at night. If they didn't already have to be.
And they get to see us in person, come on, that's.
Well, I know that's the benefit, but just something more.
so I will send an invite in the next 24 hours for June 21st, 5 p.m. start time, and July 19th, 5 p.m. start time.
Sounds good.
I think with that, we get to adjourn the meeting. Do I have a motion to adjourn?
Motion adjourned.
Okay.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. We are adjourned. Thanks, guys. Thanks, you guys, for staying so late.
Almost done. And bring that charger that.
Mine's
Yeah.
it was